Chapter 1. After being married to Lu Cheating, the most noble and cold goddess in the Beijing circle for 6 years, Song Hongi has never been able to warm her heart. Just like her mother, her daughter Xiaobao only likes another man Zhao Chuanzi. When trapped under the rubble of the earthquake, Song Hongi clearly heard Xiaobao crying and calling for Dad Zhao to save her. In that case, he doesn't want his wife and daughter anymore. At night, Song Hongi took a shower and walked into the lighted study. Amid the scent of sandalwood, Lu Cheating was processing documents, wearing a Buddha amulet around her neck and Buddhist beads around her wrists. Seeing him come in, Lu Cheating frowned and quickly looked away. What's the matter? Song Hongi stopped 3 meters away and asked softly, tomorrow is Xiaobao's birthday, can you come back to accompany her? Before she could answer, he took the initiative to say, I invited Mr. Zhao, and he promised to come. It seemed that when she heard him mention Zhao Chuanzi, Lu Cheating was stunned for a rare moment. Song Hongi saw her reaction clearly and felt a little uneasy. He pulled the corners of his lips and pretended to be calm and said, I have 3 operations tomorrow, so I won't be back. You guys celebrate. Anyway, it's enough for Xiaobao to have her dad Zhao. Before he could finish his words, Lu Cheating frowned and interrupted him coldly, Song Hongi, what are you trying to do? Are you making trouble? He just wanted to help their family of 3. Anyway, he has already obtained a place in the school for exchange and further studies abroad, so he will make room for Zhao Chuanzi directly at that time. Lu Cheating is with the men she loves, and Xiaobao will have a father she truly loves. Before he could speak, a childish voice sounded behind him. Dad, you're not coming back tomorrow? Where's my birthday present? Song Hongi turned around and looked at Xiaobao. The 5-year-old child couldn't hide his emotions, and his face was filled with unconcealable joy, which was dazzling. Fortunately, he is no longer sad about these things. Song Hongi just looked down at Xiaobao and said calmly, I will give you money, just buy whatever you like. On Xiaobao's birthday last year, Song Hongi gave her her favorite Lego. She spent several days assembling the Lego model, and immediately gave it to Zhao Chuanzi to please him. So this year, he chose to give the money directly. Xiaobao can buy whatever he wants for Zhao Chuanzi. After saying that, Song Hongi ignored Xiaobao's disappointed and stunned expression, turned back to look at Lu Cheating, and pulled the corners of his lips calmly, good night. He turned back to his guest room and closed the door. Lying on the bed, Song Hongi couldn't help but recall the past. Lu Cheating is the eldest daughter of the Beijing circle and a flower on the mountain top, noble yet out of reach. Song Hongi has loved her for more than 10 years. 6 years ago, after someone set him up to have a crazy night with her, he had Xiaobao. Lu Cheating had to fulfill the engagement and marry him, but the person in her heart has always been Zhao Chuanzi, her white moonlight. Lian Xiaobao only wants to recognize Zhao Chuanzi as his father. Fortunately, he will withdraw soon, and soon, he can help everyone. The next day. As soon as Song Hongi finished the operation, he received a call from Xiaobao. Dad, when will you come back? I'm waiting for you to come back and cut the cake together. The childish voice coming from the receiver made Song Hongi's heart suddenly ache. How long has it been since Xiaobao acted like a spoiled child to him like this? He almost forgot that Xiaobao used to hug him and comfort him when Lu Cheating was indifferent to him. I hate Mom the most. Don't be sad, Dad. When Xiaobao grows up, he will protect Dad. Song Hongi felt sad, and thinking that everything was fine in the hospital, he agreed. When he got home, the servant saw him and looked panicked. Sir, you are not coming back. When Song Hongi saw him like this, his heart sank inexplicably. Before he could say anything, he heard laughter coming from the living room. My dear little treasure, this is a cake I made by myself. Your mother specially asked me to make it for you. Dad Zhao, Xiaobao likes you so much. Song Hongi looked in the direction of the voice and saw Xiaobao hugging Zhao Chuanzi affectionately and acting coquettishly. Lu Cheating watched them playing with a doting look on her face. Looks like a family of 3. Chapter 2. Song Hongi stood at the door, feeling like an outsider who had accidentally entered someone else's home. Zhao Chuanzi noticed him first. The smile on his face faded instantly and he pushed Xiaobao away awkwardly. Hongi, the kids are just playing around and talking nonsense, don't think too much about it. Only then did Xiaobao and Lu Cheating realize that Song Hongi had returned. When Lu Cheating saw him, her eyes instantly turned colder, Didn't you say you had surgery and wouldn't be coming back? Xiaobao said in a low voice with a guilty conscience, I want Dad to come back to eat cake. The cake made by Dad Zhao is delicious. Song Hongyi wanted to laugh. Xiaobao called him back specifically to let him eat the cake made by Zhao Chuanzi. Song Hongyi looked at the half-eaten cake on the table and the strawberries piled on it, and couldn't help but ask Lu Qiting. Did you specially ask Mr. Zhao to make this strawberry cake? Lu Qiting frowned, as if she thought he was coming to accuse her. She said in a cold voice, the child just likes Chuanzi's craftsmanship. You don't have to do this. You make everyone unhappy as soon as you come here. Song Hongyi stood there without moving, but couldn't help but laugh at himself. Sure enough, he is always the one who is out of place. Song Hongyi suppressed his emotions and said calmly, I just came back to rest, I don't mean anything else, you guys continue. Having said that, he turned around and went upstairs. Zhao Chuanzi suddenly called him, Hongyi, there are 2 pieces of cake left, would you like to join us? Song Hongyi paused, feeling that the host's tone was harsh to the ear. He didn't say anything, just shook his head, I don't eat strawberries. After saying this, he turned around and went upstairs. Lu Qiting, who was sitting upright on the sofa, changed her expression. Only then did she remember that Song Hongyi seemed allergic to strawberries. Song Hongyi returned to his room, changed his clothes despite his tired body, and then he received a call from Grandpa Lu. Hongyi, today is my great-granddaughter's birthday. I brought her a gift. Song Hongyi was startled, and just as he was about to speak, the phone was hung up. Almost immediately, a quarrel was heard downstairs. He quickly got up and went downstairs, only to see Grandpa Lu with red eyes, hitting Lu Qiting mercilessly with his cane. How many times have I told you that you should break up with this man now that you are married to Hongyi? Zhao Chuanzi tried to block the old man's cane with distressed look on his face. Grandpa, it's my fault, please don't hit her. Lu Qiting said nothing, but her eyes turned colder as she looked at Song Hongyi. In the past, Song Hongyi would have rushed over with heartache to plead for Lu Qiting. But now, he just watched the scene calmly, with no ripples in his heart. At this moment, Xiaobao suddenly broke free from the servant's hand, rushed over angrily, pushed him hard, and kept hitting him. It's all because of you and great-grandpa complaining that Mom got beaten. It's all because of you that Dad Zhao got wronged. Song Hongyi almost couldn't stand, and every blow seemed to hit him in the heart. Grandpa Lu quickly grabbed Xiaobao, his face full of heartache. Be good, Xiaobao. Don't associate with that man anymore. Your father is Hongyi. Lu Qiting pursed her lips and said calmly, Xiaobao likes to call Chuanzi dad, so let her do that. Grandpa Lu was furious and shouted angrily, kneel down. Song Hongyi didn't want Grandpa Lu to be upset, so he stepped forward to support him and spoke softly. Grandpa, don't be angry. Xiaobao is young and doesn't understand. It doesn't matter who she likes to call dad. Besides, I invited Mr. Zhao to be my guest. Grandpa Lu looked at him in surprise, as if he understood something. He sighed deeply, his eyes moistened. Good boy, you have been wronged. Song Hongyi lied without blinking. I haven't been wronged. Qi Ting treats me very well. After saying that, he helped Grandpa Lu to the restaurant for dinner, ignoring Lu Qiting's complicated look. It doesn't matter whether you feel wronged or not. During the meal, Lu Qiting probably felt that she owed Song Hongyi something, so she rarely took the initiative to pick up food for him. Grandpa Lu glanced at Zhao Chuanzi and deliberately spoke to Song Hongyi and Lu Qiting. Hongyi, you and Qiting should have another child while you are still young. Song Hongyi paused. In fact, except for the time when she was pregnant with Xiaobao, Lu Qiting never had any intimate behavior with him again. And now that I'm preparing for a divorce, why would I want a second child? Chapter 3. Seeing Lu Qiting was about to speak, Song Hongyi took the lead in explaining. Grandpa, Qi Ting and I have already discussed it. We will only have Xiaobao as our child in this life. Lu Qiting probably didn't expect him to say that, and there was a hint of inquiry in her eyes as she looked at him. After all, Song Hongyi had mentioned having a second child many times before. Song Hongyi didn't care and didn't explain much. After coaxing Grandpa Lu to finish his meal and sending him off, he went upstairs to rest. The next morning, after Song Hongyi finished washing up, he saw Xiaobao walking into the room with a sandwich in his hand, looking embarrassed. Dad, I'm sorry for giving you a sandwich yesterday. If Song Hongi had been asked for peace like this in the past, he would have been extremely soft-hearted. But Song Hongi remembered the time before when he kissed Xiaobao lovingly, but Xiaobao wiped his face in disgust. Song Hongi withdrew his thoughts, took his phone from her hand, and smiled distantly. Thank you, you can eat your sandwich. Also, don't play with my phone casually in the future, got it? Xiaobao looked up at him in surprise, with a somewhat hurt expression. But soon, she pursed her lips, turned and ran away. Song Hongi shook his head indifferently, packed up and went to the hospital. This period was a critical time in his competition for the director position, so he was extra cautious in his work. As soon as he arrived at the hospital, Song Hongi heard his colleagues gossiping. Dr. Song, have you heard? The hospital is going to parachute in a new attending physician, and it is said that he is also running for the position of director. Song Hongi frowned, a little surprised. This is a top private hospital, and its medical standards are far ahead in all aspects. How could a doctor suddenly appear here for no reason? And their Song family is the largest shareholder of this hospital. At this moment they suddenly became excited, looked behind Song Hongi, and lowered their voices. Dr. Song, look, that's the new doctor. I heard his name is Zhao Chuanza. Song Hongi took a deep breath and turned his head to look. Zhao Chuanza suddenly appeared in front of him in a white coat, looking surprised. Hongi, we will be colleagues from now on. Song Hongi looked at Zhao Chuanza and understood why he parachuted in. When he married Lu Cheating, he didn't want her to think that he was after her status, so he gave all his property to her to manage. But now, she arranged for Zhao Chuanza to collapse the hospital invested by the Song family. Song Hongi felt a chill in his heart and did not respond to Zhao Chuanza's words. He just felt that he was extremely stupid in the past. Just then, there was a sudden commotion in the hospital corridor. Wow, that woman is so beautiful. Who is she? Is that her child next to her? I don't know who her husband is, but he must be very handsome to have such a cute daughter. Lu Cheating and Xiaobao also appeared in the hospital at this time, bypassing Song Hongi and walking straight towards Zhao Chuanza. Xiaobao hugged Zhao Chuanza and shouted with a smile, Dad Zhao, I miss you so much. Even the usually cold Lu Cheating smiled at this moment. Congratulations on finding the job you dream of. People around were envious. I didn't expect Dr. Zhao to have such a beautiful wife and such a well-behaved daughter. He is definitely a winner in life. Whoever says it's not, I'm so jealous. Only a few people knew the relationship between Song Hongi and Lu Cheating, and they either glanced at Song Hongi out of sympathy or watching the show. Song Hongi just stood outside the crowd, watching the happy scene in front of him with an expressionless face. Chapter 4. After a while, Lu Cheating noticed Song Hongi, and her expression was a little unnatural for a moment. She was about to speak when suddenly an urgent shout was heard. Make way. This is an elderly heart patient who needs surgery right away. The urgent sound brought everyone back to their senses instantly. The moment Song Hongi saw the patient, his eyes suddenly widened. Grandfather. He was fine yesterday, why did he have a heart attack today? Lu Cheating no longer had her usual calmness at this moment. Xiaobao seemed to be frightened and cried, Grandpa. Save Grandpa. Song Hongi didn't dare to delay for a moment and hurried into the operating room. He has always been Grandpa Lu's attending physician, and he is the lead surgeon this time as well. This operation took nearly 7 hours to complete. When he walked out of the operating room, Song Hongi walked a little unsteadily and his face was pale. But he still pulled himself together, followed Grandpa Lu's transfer bed to the ward, and informed Lu Cheating and Xiaobao, Grandpa is out of danger, he's fine. But what he met was Lu Cheating's chilling eyes. Why did you want to provoke Grandpa and cause his heart disease to relapse? Song Hongi's face was blank. What did I do? Lu Cheating threw Grandpa Lu's phone into his hand. The evidence is irrefutable, what are you trying to argue about? Song Hongi lowered his eyes and saw a message he sent this morning displayed on his phone interface. Grandpa, I want to divorce Lu Cheating. The ward suddenly became deathly silent. Song Hongi looked at the message, and almost instantly, he remembered that Xiaobao had played with his phone in the morning. At this time, Xiaobao lowered his head and pinched his fingers. As if she felt Song Hongi's inquiring gaze, the moment she raised her head, her face turned pale. After Song Hongi's anger, he inexplicably calmed down. Xiaobao, why did you send this message? Lu Qiting protected the child behind her with a cold face. When did you learn to blame a child for your mistakes? Song Hongyi heard the disappointment in her words and found it ridiculous. You think I wronged her? Lu Qiting's dark eyes seemed to be icy, isn't it? Before Song Hongyi could say anything, Xiaobao suddenly burst into tears, his face full of guilt and fear. I didn't know that sending that message would make my great-grandfather sick. I just wanted my father and mother to divorce so that Father Zhao could be my father. Song Hongyi's eyes went dark, and his heart was tormented by anger and chill. After a long silence, he just uttered softly, "Don't worry, I won't keep you waiting too long." Lu Qiting frowned when she heard this, and said with a complaint, "Xiaobao is still a child, you are her father, there is no need to bother with her." Song Hongyi found this ridiculous. It's your grandfather lying in the hospital bed now, and you blame me for making a fuss. Lu Qiting paused for a moment, her eyes seemed to show some guilt, and she wanted to say something. At this moment, Grandpa Lu, who was lying on the hospital bed, woke up, looked around, and then heaved a sigh of relief. Hongyi. Song Hongyi stepped forward quickly, "Grandpa." Lu Qiting didn't say anything more and went to the bedside. Xiaobao even held Grandpa Lu's hand and wiped his tears, "Great-grandpa." Grandpa Lu touched Xiaobao's head lovingly, but stared at Song Hongyi closely. "Hongyi, Xiaobao is still young. For the sake of the child, don't divorce Qiting. Promise me." Song Hongyi's throat choked. He closed his eyes in pain. After a while, he said in a hoarse voice, "Don't worry about it. Have a good rest." Then he hurried away, making the excuse of going out to deal with other matters. He really couldn't lie to Grandpa Lu, but he couldn't agree not to divorce either. His life can only be decided by himself. Chapter 5. On the day Grandpa Lu was discharged from the hospital, Song Hongyi went to pick him up. Grandpa Lu asked with a smile, "Why didn't Qiting and Xiaobao come?" Song Hongyi glanced at the time. Xiaobao went to school. Today is the 15th day of the lunar month. Qiting is practicing in the temple. Grandpa Lu's face suddenly darkened. "Call Qiting back, and let's have a meal together as a family." Song Hongyi didn't want to spoil the old man's fun, so he had to ask for leave and go up the mountain to the Bodhi temple to find Lu Qiting. It is summer now, there are many mosquitoes in the mountains, and the mountain roads are not easy to walk on. He recalled that he had gone up the mountain to look for her many times, but was turned away each time. In the end, she couldn't stand it anymore, and she was even warned. When he arrived at the temple, a young monk saw him and asked gently, "Donor, what can I do for you?" Song Hongyi collected his thoughts and smiled, "I'm here to find Lu Qiting." The young monk took him to a meditation room and left. Song Hongyi walked to the door and was about to knock when he heard Zhao Chuanza's aggrieved voice coming from inside the room. The next second, Lu Qiting's gentle and concerned voice rang out, "Chuanza, I will keep this child." Song Hongyi stood outside the door, but his heart seemed to be sinking into ice water bit by bit. At this moment, the door of the Zen room suddenly opened. Lu Qiting suddenly met Song Hongyi's gaze, and a trace of panic flashed in her eyes. Soon, everything returned to indifference. "Didn't I tell you not to come to the temple where I practice?" Song Hongyi asked her back, "If I don't come, how long do you want to keep it a secret from me?" Lu Qiting's eyes were gloomy and she didn't say anything. Zhao Chuanza gently persuaded, "Hongyi, don't blame Qiting, everything is my fault." Song Hongyi found himself in an absurdly calm mood. He just looked at Lu Qiting and asked, "Is it his child?" Lu Qiting slowly turned the Buddhist beads, with a pure look in her eyes, just like a Buddhist girl sitting on a lotus seat, untainted by the mundane world. But to remain silent is to admit it. Song Hongyi wanted to laugh. He originally thought that Lu Qiting was unwilling to be intimate with him in the past 6 years because she wanted to practice abstinence. But I never thought that she even had a child with another man. Song Hongyi was extremely disappointed. "Congratulations. If necessary, I can always make room for Mr. Zhao." Lu Qiting and Zhao Chuanza's expressions changed. However, Song Hongyi turned around and left without even looking back. As soon as Song Hongyi returned to the Lu family, Lu Qiting came back. She still had a cold face and whispered a warning beside him, "Grandpa is in good health, don't say anything you shouldn't say." Song Hongyi felt sick and ignored her. Xiaobao ran over, and when he saw that there were only 2 of them, his mouth pursed. Mom, Mr. Zhao is also Xiaobao's family, why can't he come to the family dinner together? The older Xiaobao gets, the more he looks like Lu cheating, even the ways of embarrassing him are exactly the same. But Song Hongyi just paused for a moment and then walked in with a normal expression. Instead, Grandpa Lu's expression changed instantly and he pounded his crutch hard. Xiaobao, apologize to your father quickly. Don't mention that men in this family anymore. Xiaobao pouted unconvincedly and said he was unwilling to do it no matter what. Finally, she got fed up with what he said and turned around and yelled at Song Hongyi, I don't want him to be my dad. After saying that, he ran back to his room without even eating. Song Hongyi stood there stiffly for a moment before looking away. Her meal will be brought up by the servants later, and we will eat by ourselves. Lu Cheating frowned and looked at him, as if blaming him for not caring enough about his own children. But he knew that Xiaobao would not want his concern. The meal was again in a weird atmosphere and ended hastily. In the afternoon, when Song Hongyi just arrived at the hospital, he saw a group of nurses cautiously surrounding Zhao Chuanzi. Congratulations, Dr. Zhao, for having such a handsome wife and such a lovely daughter, and now a second child. When Song Hongyi heard this, he stopped. He was about to leave when Zhao Chuanzi suddenly said, Hongyi, Qi Ting is having severe morning sickness, what should we do? His colleagues all sensed something was wrong with what he said suddenly. Zhao Chuanzi is also a doctor, how could he not know? But they didn't dare to think too much and left quickly. Now there are only two of them left. Zhao Chuanzi took out his cell phone and walked up to Song Hongyi with a smile. Song Hongyi, if I were you, I would have left long ago. After all, Qi Ting has to cook soup for me every day. Song Hongyi was forced to see the contents of his mobile phone. The woman who always claimed that Buddhism does not allow killing would go into the kitchen again and again for Zhao Chuanzi when she was pregnant. Song Hongyi looked at Zhao Chuanzi's arrogant appearance, but felt a little sad in his heart. If she really loves you that much, she will give you enough respect and security, and you won't have to resort to such means to get ahead. Chapter 6. Zhao Chuanzi's expression changed, shut up. Qi Ting has never loved you, what qualifications do you have to say that to me? Song Hongyi's face remained calm, and there was no ripple in his heart. He knew from the beginning that Lu Cheating had never loved him. Besides, he doesn't need Lu Cheating's love now. Song Hongyi said nothing more and turned and left. He returned to the office, but he couldn't suppress the emotions in his heart. All that was in my mind was the image of Lu Cheating wearing an apron, cooking, and feeding Zhao Chuanzi. He thought that even if he had to consider Grandpa Lu's feelings, he had to get a divorce. Song Hongyi thought about it and took out his mobile phone to send a message to Lu Cheating. Let's talk. But the message sent out fell on deaf ears. At this time, several doctors passed by chatting. Have you heard? The director has been chosen. Who is it? Song Hongyi's heart inexplicably tightened and he couldn't help but turn his head to look. Then the doctor said mysteriously, it's the new Dr. Zhao, Zhao Chuanzi. Song Hongyi's breath hitched, and his hand holding the phone suddenly tightened. Even if the position of director is not given to him, it is impossible to give it to Zhao Chuanzi who has just arrived and can't do anything well. He stood up suddenly and called out to two doctors who had just passed by. Tell me again, who is the director? The two of them usually have a good relationship with Song Hongyi, so they feel a little sympathetic about Song Hongyi's failure to be elected. Dr. Song, you are still young. There will be a next time. After all, no one can compete with the boss's family. Yes, the woman who came to the hospital last time is actually the largest shareholder of our hospital. She is from the Song family. Song Hongyi's mood hit rock bottom and he felt completely absurd. He gave his property to Lu Cheating to manage, but she used his assets to unconditionally support Zhao Chuanzi. Not far away, Zhao Chuanzi was being treated like a star by everyone, with a smug look on his face. Dr. Zhao is simply a winner in life. Why call me Dr. Zhao? Call me director now. Zhao Chuanzi smiled, met Song Hongyi's gaze, deliberately raised his eyebrows at him, and winked at him ostentatiously. Song Hongyi forced himself to look away, returned to the office, and called Lu Cheating. After a long time, Lu Cheating answered the call, what's the matter? Song Hongyi asked directly, why did you use the Song family's connections to let Zhao Chuanzi go through the back door? The woman was silent for a while, then said calmly, you are my husband, and you have the support of the Lu family. What does it matter whether you are the director or not? Song Hongi became even angrier. With just a few words from Lu Cheating, all his efforts in his work became a joke. He hung up the phone without saying a word and began to arrange people to recover his premarital property. At dusk, Song Hongi returned to the Lu family. I saw Xiaobao drawing on the table. His little body was illuminated by the afterglow of the setting sun, and he looked so beautiful. Song Hongi hesitated for a moment, but still walked over. When he saw the content of the painting, he was stunned. Xiaobao drew a family of 3, but the male owner's name was written as Zhao Chuanzi. Song Hongi was so disappointed that he couldn't help asking, "Do you like Zhao Chuanzi so much? You obviously liked Dad the most before." Xiaobao protected his painting and looked at Song Hongi with hostility. "That's because I didn't know you were this kind of person before. They all said that you were able to marry Mom because you drugged her. Dad Zhao is the best man in the world. If you hadn't taken Dad Zhao's place, I would be Dad Zhao and Mom's child." Chapter 7. Song Hongi looked at the child in front of him. Since she believed that Zhao Chuanzi should be her father, he would return her father to her. That afternoon, the lawyer delivered the divorce agreement. After finalizing the contents of the divorce agreement, Song Hongi began to busy himself with taking back his property and sorting out various matters related to the future divorce. However, in the evening, Song Hongi suddenly received a call from the dean. A magnitude 7 earthquake occurred in Yunzhou town, and more than 200 people have been injured or killed. Our hospital is preparing to organize a medical rescue team to go to the disaster relief. Are you willing? Song Hongi said without hesitation, "I do. Saving lives and healing the wounded is a doctor's duty, and he cannot shirk his responsibility." The dean seemed relieved and said, "We'll leave tomorrow morning, so be ready." Song Hongi responded in a low voice. After hanging up the phone, he got up and left the room. He had to discuss the divorce with Lu Cheating before leaving, so that he could go directly to the Civil Affairs Bureau when he returned. The corridor was pitch black, with only light coming through the crack of the door of the meditation room where Lu Cheating usually practiced. "It's so late, why is Lu Cheating still practicing?" Lu Cheating once made it clear that Song Hongi was not allowed to set foot in that meditation room. Over the years, he has always been tactful and never disturbed her when she was practicing. Song Hongi was a little hesitant, but at this moment, he heard a charming voice coming from the room. "Ah Chi Ting, be gentle, I can't bear it anymore." Song Hongi's heart skipped a beat and he pushed open the door. The ambiguous scene inside was exposed before his eyes. Zhao Chuanzi was seen sitting on a chair in his bathrobe, with Lu Cheating sitting astride him, both of them with different blushes on their faces. The door hit the wall with a dull thud. Lu Cheating's hand on Zhao Chuanzi's shoulder trembled, and there was still lust in her eyes that had not yet dissipated. The moment she saw Song Hongi, the lust in her eyes turned into shock and panic. Zhao Chuanzi was startled. Lu Cheating stood up in panic. But because of this action, a string of Buddhist beads shining with water fell out from under her skirt. The moment he saw the thing clearly, Song Hongi's stomach churned. He didn't expect that Lu Cheating, who was devoted to Buddhism, would be in this meditation room where he was not allowed to enter. Making love with the men you love. He tried his best to suppress his churning stomach and said in a tense voice, "Excuse me, please continue." "Mom, Dad Zhao, what are you doing?" As soon as Song Hongi turned around, he saw Xiaobao appear at the door at some point, rubbing his eyes with a confused look on his face. He froze for a moment, thinking that it would be bad for a 5-year-old child to witness such a scene, and was about to ask her to go back. But he didn't expect that when Xiaobao saw him, his face was immediately filled with disgust. Then she ran to Zhao Chuanzi and acted coquettishly, "Dad Zhao, I want to hear your story." As she spoke, she deliberately glanced at Song Hongi. Zhao Chuanzi also smiled and glanced at him. "Okay, Xiaobao, go back to sleep first. Dad Zhao will talk to your mother about something, and then he will tell you a story, okay?" Song Hongi understood the meaning of his words, curled the corners of his lips without saying a word, and turned away. The next morning, Song Hongi boarded a bus to Yunzhou town. On the way, he sent a message to Lu Cheating. "I went to Yunzhou town to help with the disaster relief. I have already signed the divorce agreement and put it on your desk in the study. Remember to sign it." After sending the message, he turned off his phone immediately, feeling disgusted even if he looked at it for any longer. After the earthquake, Yunzhou town has become a ruin, with countless injured and the death toll still rising. Song Hongyi and his colleagues immediately started the rescue work and time passed quickly. It was not until it was getting dark that he suddenly heard a familiar childish voice. "Mom, Dad Zhao, it's so scary here." Song Hongyi froze and turned around to look. Lu Qiting was seen holding Xiaobao in one hand and holding hands with Zhao Chuanzi with the other hand. They arrived at the disaster relief site at some point. Chapter 8. Probably he came here with Zhao Chuanzi. After just a glance, Song Hongyi calmly withdrew his gaze and continued to work on the task at hand. But Zhao Chuanzi saw him with sharp eyes. "Hongyi." The next moment, the three of them walked over here. Especially Lu Qiting, who looked at him with a terrifyingly gloomy look. Song Hongyi looked at them helplessly, his gaze lingering on Xiaobao's face for a moment. "Why did you bring a child here? It's dangerous here." He would no longer care what Lu Qiting and Zhao Chuanzi wanted to do. But he really couldn't bear to see a child being taken to a disaster site. He would have said the same thing even if it was someone else's child. Lu Qiting seemed to have misunderstood his meaning. Xiaobao has her own ideas. Even if you are her father, you can't interfere too much. Xiaobao deliberately snorted, "Don't be so self-indulgent. My mother and I are here to accompany Father Zhao to help with disaster relief. I'm not going back." Zhao Chuanzi deliberately coughed lightly. "Hongyi, Qiting, and Xiaobao are outside the cordon. They will not be in danger. You don't have to worry." Song Hongyi looked at them, who looked like a family of three, nodded, and said politely, "Okay." Just as he finished speaking, an anxious call came from not far away. "Dr. Song, Director Zhao. Come and help." Song Hongyi's heart tightened and he turned around and left in a hurry without even looking at them again. It started to drizzle and the rescue progress gradually slowed down. Seeing Zhao Chuanzi idling away alone, Song Hongyi frowned and was about to ask Zhao Chuanzi to go to the logistics department. Suddenly, a loud shout came from a distance, "An aftershock is coming. Run!" The earth began to shake violently again, cracks appeared on the walls, and everyone was screaming and running away. Before Song Hongyi could react, he and Zhao Chuanzi were buried in the rubble. When the aftershocks ended, everything returned to calm. "Help!" Song Hongyi was trapped under the rubble, unable to see any light, and his breathing gradually became weaker. After an unknown amount of time, a childish voice called him back to consciousness. "Dad Zhao. I want Dad Zhao." He suddenly came to his senses and managed to speak. "We are here, help." His voice allowed rescuers to quickly find the place. The rubble above was moved away, allowing a ray of light to filter through. Song Hongyi was just beginning to feel hope when he heard the rescuers say, "Ms. Lu, Dr. Song, and Director Zhao are pinned down by the two ends of the cement slab. If one end is lifted, the other one will. We can only save one." Almost as soon as he finished speaking, Xiaobao started crying and shouting, "Save Dad Zhao. I want to save Dad Zhao." The moment Song Hongyi heard Xiaobao's choice, he felt like he had died once. At this critical moment of life and death, his child still firmly chose someone else. Lu Qiting's voice did not sound for a long time. Until the rescue worker said anxiously, "Ms. Lu, if you don't make a decision now, there will be no rescue when the aftershock comes." After a long while, Lu Qiting said coldly, "Save Director Zhao." Song Hongyi slowly closed his eyes and fell into complete despair. Rescuers lifted the stone slab to rescue Zhao Chuanzi. The rough and heavy stone slab pressed down heavily on Song Hongyi, aggravating his injuries. He silently spat out a mouthful of blood and his consciousness suddenly became dizzy. Before he completely lost consciousness, he heard Xiaobao crying, "Dad Zhao, I thought you were dead. Don't ever leave me again." Song Hongyi closed his eyes tiredly and fell into darkness. When Song Hongyi woke up again, he found himself back in the Imperial Capital Hospital. When Grandpa Lu saw him wake up, he quickly called a doctor. The doctor came over and examined him for a while before saying, "The patient is fine. He just needs to stay in the hospital for a few more days for observation." Song Hongyi's eyes suddenly became sore when he saw Grandpa Lu, who seemed to be a dozen years older, guarding his bedside. Grandpa Lu's eyes flashed with guilt. "Child, you have suffered, take a good rest and don't think about anything." Song Hongyi closed his eyes and said nothing. Even if Grandpa Lu didn't say it, he knew that the old man should already know everything. This is a good thing. Once his injury is almost healed, it will be time for him to go abroad. Chapter 9. A few more days passed. Song Hongyi went to complete the discharge procedures and for the first time took the initiative to push open the door of Zhao Chuanzi's ward. Sure enough, Lu Qiting and Xiaobao were both with him. Seeing Song Hongyi coming over, Lu Qiting's expression suddenly became subtle. "Why are you here?" Perhaps the vigilance in her voice was too obvious. Lu Qiting paused and asked again. "How is your injury?" Song Hongyi pulled the corner of his lips. "I'm lucky, I won't die." At this time, Xiaobao opened his arms to protect Zhao Chuanzi's bed and stared at him with rejection. "Then what are you doing here? You bad man, don't hurt Father Zhao." Song Hongyi just felt like there was a fire burning in his chest. He is so badly injured now, how can he have the strength to hurt Zhao Chuanzi? Not to mention that the mother and daughter treated Zhao Chuanzi like the apple of their eye. Song Hongyi said calmly, "Lu Qiting, when are you free? Let's go to the Civil Affairs Bureau to get a divorce. I only want to take back the part of the property that belongs to me. Everything else and this child will belong to you." Lu Qiting's expression suddenly turned cold, and after a while, she asked, "Song Hongyi, are you serious?" Song Hongyi gave her a strange look. "Do I look like I'm kidding?" He added, "Who you want to marry in the future, who Xiaobao wants to recognize as his father, has nothing to do with me." When Xiaobao heard this, he was so shocked that his eyes turned red and tears fell one by one. The next moment, she clenched her fists and shouted angrily. "You don't want me, and I don't want you either. I want Father Zhao to be my real father." As she said that, she deliberately rushed over and hugged Zhao Chuanzi tightly. Zhao Chuanzi suppressed his joy and said in a worried tone, "Hongyi, you can't just talk about divorce. Did you misunderstand something? I've always asked Qiting and Xiaobao to find time to visit you, but..." Lu Qiting suddenly took over the conversation. "Song Hongyi, I haven't visited you for a while because..." Song Hongyi interrupted her directly. "Does it matter why? I gave you the divorce agreement before I went to the disaster relief. It has nothing to do with whether you come to see me or not." When Lu Qiting saw his attitude, her eyes turned cold. She seemed very angry and nodded, "Very good, don't regret it." Song Hongyi frowned, not knowing what she was angry about. Lu Qiting didn't stay any longer and took him home. She signed the divorce agreement temporarily, took other documents, and went directly to get a divorce with Song Hongyi. The moment he came out of the Civil Affairs Bureau, Song Hongyi felt more relaxed than ever before. After 5 years of marriage, his love for Lu Qiting had long since faded away. Lu Qiting was standing not far from him, waiting for him to regret. Unexpectedly, Song Hongyi glanced at the Buddhist beads in her hand, hesitated for a moment, and said, "There are a lot of bacteria on people's hands every day, so remember to disinfect them." Lu Qiting reacted almost immediately, her whole body froze, and she wanted to explain, "I..." But Song Hongyi had already turned around and left without any reluctance. For some reason, she felt inexplicably confused as she watched Song Hongyi's back as he left. She subconsciously wanted to call Song Hongyi, but the phone rang at this moment. Zhao Chuanzi's gentle voice sounded in his ears, "Qiting, Xiaobao wants you to take her to eat, can we go together?" Lu Qiting hesitated for a moment, but turned around and got into the car. In any case, Song Hongyi will admit defeat in less than a week. Song Hongyi went back to Lu's house, packed his luggage, and disposed of all the items related to him. Then he dragged his suitcase and boarded a plane to a foreign country alone. Looking at the imperial capital getting farther and farther away outside the window, Song Hongyi closed his eyes without any lingering feelings. In the blink of an eye, another midsummer is here. After 6 years, Song Hongyi returned to the imperial capital again, holding the hand of a beautiful little girl. Lei Lei looked at the huge imperial capital airport, raised his head and asked curiously, "Dad, whose illness did you come to imperial capital to treat this time?" 6 years have passed, Song Hongyi has already married and now has a 4-year-old daughter. He pinched Lei Lei's chubby cheeks and said with a smile, "He's Dad's old friend." Lei Lei seemed to understand, but not quite. He held Song Hongyi tightly and was full of curiosity about everything here. As they were walking, Lei Lei suddenly pointed to a spot and said in surprise, "Dad, that sister looks like you." Song Hongyi paused and suddenly heard 2 familiar yet unfamiliar voices. Song Hongi. Dad. Song Hongi's heart trembled, and he turned his head suddenly to look. Song Hongi actually saw Lu Cheating and a girl in her teens walking towards him with anxious eyes. Chapter 10. After not seeing her for 6 years, Lu Cheating seemed to have lost her Buddhist heart, and the Buddhist beads were no longer in her hands. And Xiaobao grew up quickly into an 11-year-old girl, so old that he could hardly recognize her. Everything seemed to have changed, yet nothing seemed to have changed. Lei Lei shook Song Hongi's hand and raised his head to ask in confusion. Dad, what's wrong with you? Song Hongi looked at the two men, distracted, and only reacted after a moment. He withdrew his gaze and looked at Lei Lei, and the uncomfortable feeling in his chest dissipated. Lei Lei, it's okay, let's go. Lei Lei jumped up and down again, tilted his head back and spoke with a smile. Dad, are you hungry? My stomach says it is hungry. Song Hongi was amused by her cute appearance. He bent down, picked her up, and scratched her nose affectionately. Dad will take you to dinner. Etc. Just as they were about to leave, Xiaobao's angry face suddenly appeared. Song Hongi took a step back holding Lei Lei and frowned. What are you doing? Xiaobao widened his eyes in disbelief and questioned. Who is this little kid? Lei Lei hugged Song Hongi tightly and stuck out her tongue at Xiaobao. Bad guy. Don't be mean to my dad. Song Hongi quickly comforted Lei Lei and kissed her cheek. Lei Lei, it's okay. Lei Lei then started laughing again, not forgetting to look at Xiaobao proudly. This was the first time Xiaobao was treated like this by Song Hongi, and he was so angry that his eyes turned red. Lu Cheating's voice, suppressed with anger, suddenly sounded behind him. Song Hongi, what did you say? Whose daughter is this? Song Hongi couldn't help thinking in his heart that he should have checked the almanac before going out, otherwise he wouldn't have met these two people as soon as he arrived in the capital. Lei Lei answered this question for Song Hongi. I am my father's daughter. Who are you, auntie? You are not as pretty as my mother. Song Hongi was slightly surprised that his daughter had such eloquence. The next second, Lei Lei started crying. Xiaobao pinched Lei Lei's arm and spoke almost through gritting his teeth. Listen carefully, little kid, this is my dad, not your dad. Song Hongi felt so distressed that he pushed Xiaobao away and said angrily. Don't hurt my daughter. Xiaobao staggered after being pushed by Song Hongi, his eyes full of disbelief and tears. It was as if she had never expected that one day, Song Hongi, who had always doted on her, would treat her like this. Song Hongi, however, acted as if he didn't notice anything. He just lifted up Lei Lei's sleeve and saw that her arm was red and swollen, his eyes full of heartache. Be good, Lei Lei, don't cry. Daddy will take you away. Lei Lei cried and hugged Song Hongi's neck tightly, crying heart-wrenchingly. Dad, they are bad guys, wait for Mom to come and find someone to beat them up. Song Hongi patted Lei Lei's back gently and spoke in a warm voice. Okay, Mom will take a few days to come, Lei Lei, don't worry. Lu Cheating seemed to have been patient for a long time and grabbed Song Hongi's wrist. How long are you going to make trouble? Do you know how long I have been looking for you? When Song Hongi was touched by her, a hint of disgust flashed in his eyes and he shook her hand away forcefully. Miss, please be respectful. You and I have no relationship anymore. You know this very well. Lu Cheating looked at him solemnly, as if it was the first day she met him. It's been so long, it's time for you to make enough trouble. Song Hongi held Lei Lei in his arms and looked at the mother and daughter, feeling ironic. I'm not making a fuss, but instead of bothering me, why don't you go find your Zhao Chuanzi? He's still watching there. As soon as Song Hongi finished speaking, Zhao Chuanzi, who had almost broken his teeth, walked over. Zhao Chuanzi suppressed the jealousy in his eyes and immediately took Lu Cheating's arm. Hongi, I haven't seen you for a long time. I didn't expect you to return to the capital. Are you not having a good time abroad? Song Hongi was not moved at all by Zhao Chuanzi's provocation and just smiled faintly. I'm sorry to disappoint you, I'm doing well and have such a lovely daughter. The smile on Zhao Chuanzi's face froze, and he continued. I wonder who Hongi's wife is. Chapter 11. Shut up. Lu Cheating's face darkened and she pulled Zhao Chuanzi away. Xiaobao took a step forward and called out softly. Dad Zhao. This was the first time that Zhao Chuanza was treated like this by Lu Cheating. He looked depressed and bit his lips without saying a word. Song Hongyi really didn't want to see them, so he picked up Lei Lei and was about to leave. As a result, Xiaobao stood in front of him again and said with an unnatural expression, "You can't leave. Mom and I worked so hard to find you." Lu Cheating's face was slightly cold. "Where else do you want to go? You should go back to the Lu family. Xiaobao can't live without his father." Song Hongyi looked at the two of them with great annoyance. "That's not what you said at the beginning. You said I was unworthy of being Xiaobao's father, and that we had no relationship for a long time." After saying that, she looked at Xiaobao, who had a conflicted look on his face. "You have already disowned me. From now on, your father is Zhao Chuanza, and Lei Lei is my only child." After saying that, Song Hongyi walked around Xiaobao and left. Xiaobao was still standing there in a daze, not reacting for a long while, his eyes revealing a panic that he himself was not aware of. Lei Lei lay on Song Hongyi's shoulder, sobbing. "Dad, I don't like it here at all. Can we leave?" Song Hongyi touched her back with heartache. "Be good, Lei Lei. Once Dad cures our old friend, we'll leave here with Mom." Lei Lei was very well behaved. After hearing what Song Hongyi said, he did not make a fuss and asked to leave. Song Hongyi sighed imperceptibly, feeling a little guilty. "I don't know how long I can live in peace in the days ahead." The next morning, Song Hongyi took Lei Lei to the hospital. He worked here back then and many people still remember him, but what is worth Song Hongyi's attention is that Zhao Chuanza is still serving as his director. Many people who tried to curry favor with Zhao Chuanza treated him with contempt. Song Hongyi didn't care about their attitude, but went to see the dean. The dean knew Song Hongyi's identity and was particularly respectful to him. "Mr. Song, you are here." Song Hongyi nodded slightly, hugged Lei Lei, and went straight to the point. "I came back this time just to treat Yan He. From now on, I will be his attending physician. Yan He is his close friend and the only heir to the Yan family in the imperial capital. It's just that he had been overseas at the time, and in recent years he was tortured by heart disease and was in great pain, so he chose to come back for conservative treatment." The dean had already received the notice from the Yan family, so he agreed immediately. "Mr. Song, we will do our best to cure Mr. Yan." Song Hongyi put Lei Lei down and took her away. Lei Lei was familiar with the smell of hospital disinfectant at a very young age, so he was not averse to it at all. When she saw Yan He, whose body was full of tubes and who was tortured by illness and looked like a monster, she was not afraid but sad. "Dad, is he the Uncle Yan who bought me so many toys before?" Song Hongyi looked at Yan He through the glass, his eyes full of heartache. "When you were just born, he insisted on being your godfather. Now I bring you to meet him. Lei Lei, call me godfather." Lei Lei touched the glass with both hands and called out in a soft voice, "Godfather, please get well soon. I will give you all my toys." As soon as Lei Lei finished speaking, Zhao Chuanza laughed scornfully. "It's really hilarious. Why are you trying to be related to someone you don't know who your bastard child was born to?" Lei Lei bared his teeth, looking like he was about to rush over and bite someone. Song Hongyi held Lei Lei down and signaled her not to move. "Lei Lei, remember, the dog bites you because it is an animal, but we are human, and there is a difference between humans and animals." Chapter 12. Zhao Chuanza realized that Song Hongyi was scolding him, and his face changed again and again. "Song Hongyi, what do you mean? I told you that it would be useless even if you came back, not to mention that you are still carrying this burden with you. You were probably unable to make a living, so you became someone else's gigolo, thinking you could use your child to get promoted, but in the end you were kicked out with your child, right?" Song Hongyi glanced at him coldly, his eyes unclear. "Will I be unable to live? It seems that you have been Lu Cheating's gigolo for too long." He didn't want to disturb Yan He's rest with Zhao Chuanza, so he took Lei Lei and left. Zhao Chuanza couldn't bear it any longer after being ignored by him. He stopped Song Hongyi outside and questioned him loudly. "Hongyi, why are you trying to steal my patient? Do you want to use Mr. Yan's relationship to get close to the Yan family?" If Song Hongyi hadn't been holding Lei Lei's hand, she would have pounced on him and bit him. People around them who don't know the truth are pointing fingers at them. But Zhao Chuanza had been in the hospital for a long time, so public opinion was on his side. Song Hongi didn't care and just said lightly. It's because I can cure Yenhe, not you, a third party who has no ability and can only rely on someone else's wife to get the position of director. As soon as the words fell, you could hear a pin drop, and almost everyone was shocked. What? Director Zhao is the third party? Is that true? Although I also think that he is not qualified to be a director. Who knows? The Song family is behind this hospital. They were the most powerful family in the imperial capital back then, although they eventually fell into decline. Zhao Chuanzi's face turned blue and red, and he clenched his fists and stared at Song Hongi. Do you think people will believe what you said? Not to mention that you are carrying a burden with you. Are you trying to curry favor with the rich? Lei Lei understood what was said and yelled angrily. Ugly man. My mom and dad are the best. I don't need to cling to others. Zhao Chuanzi had been offended by Lei Lei again and he couldn't bear it anymore. You little brat is ignorant. I am here to discipline you on behalf of your parents. Bang. Song Hongi picked up Lei Lei and punched him hard with his hand. Everyone covered the place where they were hit in surprise, their faces full of shock. Zhao Chuanzi's face twisted for a moment, his eyes full of resentment. Song Hongi, you dare to hit me. Song Hongi covered Lei Lei's eyes, he was really annoyed. I'll beat you up if I want to. Do I have to pick a date? If you feel you're not up to the task, go talk to the Yan family in person. After saying this, Song Hongi hugged Lei Lei and left. Zhao Chuanzi stood there staring fiercely at Song Hongi's departing back, a hint of malice flashing in his eyes. Lei Lei looked very excited and laughed all the time. Dad is awesome. But it's a pity that Mom should have seen it. Song Hongi pinched Lei Lei's cheek but did not blame her. You really are your mother's little follower. Song Hongi. Song Hongi paused and fell silent as he looked at Lu Cheating, who was leaning against the car smoking. Looking at the cigarette butts piled on the ground, you can tell that she has been standing here for a long time. Lu Cheating looked at Lei Lei with a slightly gloomy expression, and after a while she looked at Song Hongi again. I tested your and Lei Lei's DNA, and she is really your child. You are abroad. Having said this, Lu Cheating couldn't say any more. Song Hongi finished the rest of her words for her. Lei Lei is my child. I'm married abroad. Are you satisfied now that you know the answer? Lu Cheating's hand holding the cigarette was shaking slightly at this moment, and finally the cigarette that had not been completely burned fell to the ground. Song Hongi, after you left, I could no longer calm down and worship Buddha. Chapter 13. Song Hongi frowned, his eyes full of disgust. Lei Lei was still here, and he didn't want to say it too bluntly. I have nothing to do with you anymore, don't come to me again. Lu Cheating knew that he cared about Lei Lei very much, but when she thought about the fact that Xiaobao had not received fatherly love for 6 years, she couldn't help but feel a trace of anger in her heart. You care about your child, but what about Xiaobao? You haven't come back to see her in 6 years. Song Hongi didn't want to answer. After all, he had been persisting just for Xiaobao. It was Xiaobao who didn't want him first and pushed him away more than once. Xiaobao has Zhao Chuanzi here, so it doesn't matter whether I'm here or not. Xiaobao, who was hiding in the car, couldn't bear it any longer after hearing these words. She ran out of the car and yelled at Song Hongi. You are not my father anymore. You and your bastard daughter should never come back. Song Hongi's heart trembled. He covered Lei Lei's ears and forced himself to suppress the anger in his heart. You should say this to your father Zhao, and to yourself. It's best if you never appear in front of me again. After saying that, Song Hongi carried Lei Lei into the car and left. When Xiaobao watched Song Hongi drive away, he already began to regret what he had said. Mom, am I going too far? Lu Cheating's face also looked a little unhappy, and she said in a deep voice. Yes, copy the family motto 10 times tonight and change your vulgar words. Xiaobao lowered her eyes, feeling wronged and sad, but there was no one anymore who would comfort her and hug her. Lu Cheating glanced at Xiaobao through the rearview mirror, lost in thought for a long while, and didn't say anything. Zhao Chuanzi, who saw everything, looked extremely ugly. Song Hongi, why did you come back? Lei Lei used Song Hongi's cell phone in the car to call her mother. Mom, when will you come over? I miss you. There seemed to be a chuckle from the other end of the phone. The voice was gentle and pleasant. I'll be there in 3 days. Does your father miss me? Lei glanced at Song Hongi secretly and covered her mouth with her hands to laugh. Dad must be missing Mom, but he won't admit it. The tips of Song Hongi's ears turned slightly red, and he coughed lightly and said, You are a little brat, let your mother take care of herself first. Hongi, I miss you so much. Hearing the woman say this, Song Hongi quickly hung up the phone. Lulu, stay at home these few days and don't open the door to strangers. Daddy is going to the hospital to treat your godfather. Lei shook his calves and nodded sensibly. Then I'll wait for Dad to come home. Song Hongi was still very relieved about this. After all, the community was a wealthy area with strong security, and the house was equipped with automatic alarm capabilities. The next day, Song Hongi finalized the treatment plan with the Yen family and began to prepare. As soon as Song Hongi walked into the hospital, almost everyone looked at him and pointed at him. The third party from that year is back again. I heard that he was sent abroad because he hooked up with Director Zhao's wife. When Song Hongi heard these words, he almost laughed out of anger. Just because he didn't make it public back then doesn't mean he will swallow his anger now. Make way. 2 nurses were pushing the cart quickly, with a pale-faced patient lying on it, while another nurse was kneeling on it and performing cardiopulmonary resuscitation. Once the curtains were drawn, the curious gazes of passers-by were blocked out. Song Hongi checked and was about to speak when he was pushed away by Zhao Chuanzi, who came over. Everyone, get out. Chapter 14. Although he didn't say it explicitly, he looked at Song Hongi provocatively. Song Hongi frowned and was too lazy to pay attention to him. Put aside your petty arrogance first, saving people is the most important thing. Zhao Chuanzi gritted his teeth, but since these people were watching, he could only endure it. But when Zhao Chuanzi pushed the needle, Song Hongi frowned and grabbed his hand. You are killing him with this injection. The patient's airway is probably blocked. Get out of here, I'll do it. Zhao Chuanzi subconsciously wanted to refuse, but Song Chuanzi had already started. He tilted the patient's head back so that the middle ligament of the cricothyroid membrane could tighten and fully stretch, and after local disinfection, he used a thick needle syringe to vertically pierce the cricothyroid membrane. Everyone was amazed by Song Hongi's quick movements. Zhao Chuanzi was so angry that his face turned red, but at this moment he could only grit his teeth and endure it. Song Hongi pressed the patient's chest and air flowed out, indicating that the puncture was successful. He then used tape to fix the needle to prevent it from moving. The patient is responding. Next, Song Hongi directed them to perform first aid, and the patient's condition was stabilized. The nurses and doctors inside started to praise him. Zhao Chuanzi's face was as gloomy as the bottom of a pot, and he snorted coldly. That's nothing. I can do it, too. It's just to give Dr. Song a chance to show up. Song Hongi shook his head. He thought Zhao Chuanzi was quite capable, but he didn't expect. You saved my Lu family's people, right? A graceful old lady appeared with her family. Lu family? Could it be the Lu family of the 3rd generation of the military? Someone in the crowd couldn't help but sigh, extremely shocked. Zhao Chuanzi's pupils trembled. This is the Lu family. Song Hongi had met this old lady Lu several times before, but he never tried to curry favor with her. Instead, he talked to her. Saving lives is the duty of our hospital, and the patient needs to stay in the hospital for observation. But at this moment, Zhao Chuanzi intervened. You must be Madame Lu, right? I was the one who saved your son just now. Don't worry, Uncle Lu is fine now. Everyone was shocked by Zhao Chuanzi's shamelessness, but they didn't dare to say anything. After all, Zhao Chuanzi was still the director of the hospital. Song Hongi simply watched his performance quietly and found it ridiculous. The dean came hurriedly at this time and dispersed the group of people watching the show. Just go do your own thing and don't gather here. The dean harshly criticized Zhao Chuanzi. You said you saved Mr. Lu. Despite the stern gaze of the dean, Zhao Chuanzi still admitted it. It's me. I don't know why Hongi wants to take the credit from me, but if Hongi really wants to be the savior of the Lu family, I don't mind. Song Hongi didn't want to argue with him in the hospital, so he just spoke coldly. It doesn't matter who it is. I've said that hospitals are for curing illnesses and saving lives, not for taking credit for these achievements. Zhao Chuanza clenched his hands tightly under his sleeves and could hardly maintain the smile on his face. Old Madame Lu saw through it all and said with a smile, "Dr. Song is right. We have no other intentions." Zhao Chuanza looked unwilling and wanted to speak several times but didn't know what to say. You are an expert in heart diseases, Song Hongyi, who is an international expert in surgery that is very difficult to schedule, Dr. Song. Song Hongyi was not surprised to be recognized, but nodded to the person who spoke. Who knew that this person would suddenly come up and speak excitedly? "Dr. Song, can you take a look at my father's illness? Please." Chapter 15. There was no reason for Song Hongyi to just stand by and watch someone die, so he just nodded and agreed. As they were leaving, someone checked on their phone and exclaimed, "I just checked it. This Dr. Song is really amazing. At least in our hospital, he has no problem being the director." I suddenly remembered that Dr. Song was a member of our hospital back then. He was supposed to be elected as the director, but in the end, it was Zhao who was elected as the director. Shoo, keep your voice down. But I also think that with Dr. Song's ability, there is no need for him to rush to be someone else's savior. When Zhao Chuanza heard these words, a hint of malice flashed in his eyes. The dean was already dissatisfied with Zhao Chuanza being the director, and he immediately said so. "Don't even think about provoking Dr. Song. Don't forget how you got your position as director." Zhao Chuanza sneered in his heart. He couldn't afford to offend him. If he could drive Song Hongyi away once, he could drive him away a second time. "What benefit did Song Hongyi give you that made you speak for him like this?" the dean said in a cold voice with sharp eyes. "The Song family is behind this hospital, and the Song family and Dr. Song have the same surname. Why would you mess with anyone else but the boss?" Almost everyone was stunned by the dean's words. They had been with Song Hongyi for such a long time, but they didn't even know that he was the Song family. "Oh my God, I'm on the wrong side. I won't be fired, will I?" "Me too," who knew Zhao Chuanza had nothing. Zhao Chuanza's chest heaved violently, but he still couldn't believe it. However, he couldn't help but believe it. The dean left after saying this. Lu Qiting brought Xiaobao to the hospital again today and saw the whole scene. Xiaobao looked at Lu Qiting and for the first time, doubts arose in his heart. "Mom, Dad Zhao seems to be a little different. I feel a little uncomfortable." Lu Qiting's eyes were deep, but she didn't answer. No one knew what she was thinking. When Zhao Chuanza saw them, he instantly forgot his previous thoughts. What about the Song family? The Song family might have scared him in the past, but with the Lu family around, what was the Song family? Zhao Chuanza immediately put on a smile and walked towards them happily. "Cheating, Xiaobao, why are you here? Are you here just to see me?" Lu Qiting fell silent and did not answer, even her eyes were following Song Hongyi. Zhao Chuanza smiled stiffly and said aggrievedly, "Cheating, if you weren't here, you wouldn't know how Hongyi humiliated me." "Hongyi, are you still blaming me?" Xiaobao couldn't bear it and quickly comforted her. "Dad Zhao, it's nothing. It's just that my mom and I came to the hospital this time to look for Dad." Zhao Chuanza's face became even uglier, and he could only hold it back until his nails dug into his flesh. "Then go ahead if you're here to look for Hongyi. I'm fine." If it were in the past, Lu Qiting would definitely come to coax him, but this time Lu Qiting just responded softly. So he took Xiaobao and left. Zhao Chuanza's fingertips trembled, his eyes were full of disbelief. After a while, he seemed to have made a decision, and finally turned and left. "Song Hongyi, I'm going to make you regret coming back." As soon as Song Hongyi returned to the office, Lu Qiting and Xiaobao followed him in again. "Dad, I have something to tell you." Xiaobao spoke hesitantly. Song Hongyi didn't look at her, but stared at Lu Qiting. "What on earth do you want to do? Why do you come to me again and again?" Chapter 16. Lu Qiting's eyes darkened, and there was restraint in her eyes. "I don't mind who you've been with abroad, and I don't mind if you bring your children with you, but from today on, you can only be my husband." Bang. Song Hongyi raised his hand and slapped her hard in the face. "What do you take me for? There are many things I didn't want to say in front of the children, but you are really pushing it too far. I didn't drug you back then. Even if we got married, it was a marriage between two families. I didn't let you down in those 6 years. Instead, you were the one who kept cheating on me. Lu cheating, I don't want you and Xiaobao anymore. I have nothing to do with you guys anymore. Lu Cheating's eyes seemed to be burning with anger as she gripped his wrist. So you cruelly abandoned Xiaobao for 6 years. Do you know how many people laughed at her because she didn't have a father? Have you ever fulfilled your responsibilities as a father? Xiaobao lowered his eyes and clenched his hands tightly, but he still couldn't hide his sadness. Who knew that Song Hongyi just curled his lips coldly with a hint of sarcasm. It was such a good performance that I almost believed it. The Lu family's children could still be laughed at. Xiaobao just looked at him in disbelief, unable to hold back the resentment in his heart any longer. Why don't you want me? Am I no better than a 4-year-old kid? You really can't compare. My daughter's heart and eyes are all about me. You really can't compare to her. Xiaobao's face suddenly changed. It was the first time Song Hongyi said this to her, and she felt it was ridiculous. You're not my father. Where did you hide him? Song Hongyi folded his arms and glanced at Lu Cheating coldly. Are you still not leaving? Lu Cheating grabbed the emotional Xiaobao. She never believed that Song Hongyi would be willing to give up Xiaobao, but looking at Song Hongyi's expression at this moment, she had to believe that he really didn't care about Xiaobao and her anymore. Lu Cheating pinched her eyebrows and said in a hoarse voice. Xiaobao, come back with me. Xiaobao's eyes were red, but he still couldn't win Song Hongyi's sympathy. Only after they all left did Song Hongyi let down his guard. Xiaobao is his own flesh and blood, how could he not feel sorry for him? But Xiaobao has already made her choice, and she should bear the consequences herself. Now he just wants to cure Yanhe and take Lei away from here, otherwise, a jealous person will be furious. Xiaobao followed her silently with his head down, not knowing what he was thinking. Just as they passed by an empty ward, Zhao Chuanza's voice came from inside. Mom, just wait. I will be able to marry Lu Cheating soon. The Lu family will be in my hands. I will have killed that old man a long time ago. I deliberately injected him with a large amount of potassium, and I can put the blame on that idiot Song Hongyi. I can only blame the old man for his bad luck. He insisted on preventing me from entering the Lu family and sending me away. But I didn't expect that idiot Song Hongyi would come back. I will kidnap his daughter and I'm not afraid that he won't come back. Lu Cheating's eyes suddenly turned cold. Xiaobao opened his eyes wide and was about to speak, but she covered his mouth. Zhao Chuanza's contemptuous voice came next. Mom, no matter what I said in the past few years, Qi Ting just didn't want to marry me. But it doesn't matter. I'll let her get pregnant and give me a son. I'm not afraid that she won't marry me. Then I will find a way to kill that ungrateful Xiaobao. After all, only my son can inherit the Lu family's assets in the future. Xiaobao struggled even harder, and finally Lu Cheating couldn't stand it anymore and pushed open the door of the ward. Zhao Chuanza's smile in the room froze instantly and his heart sank. Xiaobao's face was full of shock, his eyes were red, and he yelled at him. You've been lying to me all these years. You're the one who killed my grandfather. Chapter 17. Lu Cheating grabbed Xiaobao, who was about to rush forward, and she stared at Zhao Chuanza seriously. Zhao Chuanza was so scared that he trembled all over. Cheating, Xiaobao, please listen to my explanation. Lu Cheating interrupted him and said coldly. Save these words for the police. She took Xiaobao away, feeling so panicked for the first time. For the first time, she felt remorse. How many times had she misunderstood Zhao Chuanza? How many times had she hurt him because of a scheming man like him? Xiaobao's eyes were full of regret and shame. Mom, I was wrong. We were all wrong. I remembered how good Dad was to me before. I regret it so much, but will Dad forgive me? Lu Cheating was very upset. She brought Xiaobao back to Song Hongyi's office, but it was empty. This scene reminded the mother and son of when Song Hongyi left 6 years ago. The house was very tidy but also very cold. They couldn't even find any trace of Song Hongyi's life in the house. It was as if Song Hongyi had been completely wiped out from their lives. At that time, Xiaobao was still in a bad mood and said it directly. He doesn't want me, and I don't want him. Lu Cheating also thought that Song Hongyi was just throwing a tantrum and would come back on his own after a while. After all, every time he got angry, he would come back on his own the next day. But what none of them expected was that Song Hongi would be gone for 6 years. They couldn't even find any trace of Song Hongi's existence in these 6 years. Mother. Xiaobao's voice brought back Lu Qiting's sanity. She was about to pick up her phone to call Song Hongi, but then she remembered that she had blocked him a long time ago. A moment later she made another call. Find me someone in the imperial capital. In a short while, Lu Qiting received a message. She took Xiaobao away quickly, her face becoming extremely ugly. Xiaobao also realized something was wrong and asked in the car. Mom, what happened? Lu Qiting's voice was particularly cold. Someone kidnapped Lei. Xiaobao was stunned, and suddenly felt a little confused. Is that the little kid who always follows his dad around? Xiaobao thought of the little girl, who was actually her sister. Mom, is Little Bean okay? Lu Qiting remained silent. She didn't know either, but she hoped that something would happen to the child so that Song Hongi could stay in the Lu family with peace of mind. Only in this way can she make up for what she owed Song Hongi over the years. Xiaobao couldn't calm down until he got an answer. Although his father already had a new child, as long as his father was willing to stay, she would reluctantly accept the new sister. The car quickly arrived at the residential area where Song Hongi lived. As soon as Lu Qiting and Xiaobao walked into the villa, they saw Song Hongi tightly hugging Lei, who was crying. Song Hongi's eyes were red, but he was still trying hard to comfort Lei. Lulu, don't be afraid. Daddy is here. The bad guys are gone. Xiaobao clenched his hands when he saw this familiar scene. She thought of how Song Hongi had treated her the same way before, and would hold her in his arms and coax her softly. My dear, you are the most important person to me. The past scene seemed to be right in front of him, but at this moment, his father was holding another child. Xiaobao turned around and couldn't help but raise his hand to wipe the tears from his face. Lu Qiting walked forward and held Song Hongi's shoulders worriedly. Hongi, are you okay? Song Hongi stared at Lu Qiting with bloodshot eyes and hatred. What on earth do you want to do? I won't disturb your life with Zhao Chuanza, and I don't like you anymore. Why on earth do you want to hurt my child? Chapter 18. Lu Qiting held his shoulders stubbornly. You've never been angry with me over a child before. Don't you love me the most? Why have you changed in the past 6 years? Do you know how I lived through those 6 years without you? Song Hongi put Lei on the sofa and slapped her hard in the face. I don't care how you live. What did Lei do wrong? How could you have the heart to do that to a 4-year-old child? Lu Qiting's chest heaved violently, and if you looked closely you could see a hint of grievance. You must come back to the Lu family with me today. Under Song Hongi's shocked gaze, she grabbed his hand and tried to pull him out. You can only be mine. Song Hongi struggled desperately, his face full of disgust. Don't touch me. Disgusting. Lu Qiting turned a deaf ear to him and just held him tightly without letting go. Song Hongi's face was full of disgust, but the disparity in their strength was too great and she couldn't break free at all. Lei cried and fell off the sofa, shouting, Dad, don't take my dad away. Song Hongi stared at Lu Qiting with hatred. If anything happens to Lei, I will never forgive you. When Xiaobao saw Lei fall down, he was about to step forward, but then stopped. This is her dad, not this little kid's. But even as she was thinking this, the little kid's crying still infected her. She still walked forward with a soft heart and hugged her half-sister. I'll take you back to my house. Dad will live there too. Lei doesn't like her sister. Although she is very young, she can feel that her father has complicated feelings towards her. Only after getting in the car did Song Hongi quickly snatch Lei from Xiaobao's arms. Lei hugged Song Hongi's neck and sobbed. Don't be afraid, Dad. I will protect you like Mom. Song Hongi hugged Lei as if she were a treasure, feeling both distressed and touched. Silly child, Daddy is sorry for you and made you suffer. Lei kissed Song Hongi on the cheek. With Daddy here, Lei is not afraid. Xiaobao watched from the side, his eyes were very lonely, and his chest seemed to be filled with grievances. Dad. She couldn't help but shout, but Song Hongi just kept a cold face and remained unmoved. The tears that Xiaobao had been holding back burst out at this moment. Dad, I was wrong. I really know I was wrong. Dad, Mom, and I know everything. It was Uncle Zhao who killed my great-grandfather. He was the one who did everything to everyone. Mom and I were just deceived. The knuckles of Lu Cheating gripping the steering wheel turned slightly white, and her eyes were full of regret. Song Hongi only showed a slight reaction when he heard his grandfather's words, but he eventually loosened his grip. Let the past be the past. Xiaobao moved closer to Song Hongi, carefully grasped his sleeve with his fingers, and pleaded. Dad, will you forgive me? Song Hongi looked at her grown-up face, smiled faintly, and pried her hands apart. I'm not your father, Xiaobao. This is your own choice. Xiaobao's pupils trembled, and at that moment it seemed as if something shattered silently. Lu Cheating slammed on the brakes at this moment. Song Hongi subconsciously protected Lei Lei and yelled, Lu Cheating, are you crazy? Lu Cheating's face was gloomy. She opened the car door and forced Song Hongi out of the car. Lei Lei was also taken away by Xiaobao, who was crying silently. After 6 years, Song Hongi stepped into the nightmare-like Lu family again, and scenes from the past came to his mind. When he saw the Zen room, his breathing suddenly became rapid. Chapter 19. Lu Cheating, you are so disgusting. Song Hongi looked at Lu Cheating with disgust. Lu Cheating's fingertips trembled at the disgust in his eyes. Hongi, after all these years, you still won't forgive me. Song Hongi clenched his fists. I told you, I don't love you anymore. You are no different from a stranger to me now. Lu Cheating's eyes were red and she threw Song Hongi on the bed. Instead, he tied the string of Buddhist beads around Song Hongi's fair wrist. Song Hongi couldn't break free and breathed rapidly. Don't touch me with something so disgusting. Lu Cheating's breath sounded in his ears. Hongi, don't worry, I washed it clean the last time I did that. Lu Cheating held his face gently, her eyes filled with endless desire. Hongi, I don't care if you've been married, have children, or get divorced, your position as my husband is still yours. During the 6 years you were away, Xiaobao missed you very much. Xiaobao is also your child. Song Hongi remained silent. Lu Cheating was getting closer and closer to him. He closed his eyes, did not struggle, but said something coldly. Don't make me hate you. Lu Cheating paused and chuckled softly, as if mocking herself. Hongi, do you hate me so much? Yes. Song Hongi answered without hesitation, which deeply hurt her heart. Lu Cheating said slowly. But I can't let you go. She left the room, as if she didn't dare to listen to what Song Hongi was going to say next. When Lu Cheating walked downstairs, she saw Xiaobao and Lei Lei facing each other. She saw Lei Lei's eyes darken. Tomorrow, the Lu family will host a banquet for all the major families and tell them all that my husband, Mr. Song Hongi, is back. The butler sighed, but still went downstairs to prepare. Lu Cheating walked up to Lei Lei and looked down at her. Who is your mother? Lei Lei was frightened by Lu Cheating and took a step back, but no one knew what he was thinking of. He put his hands on his hips and spoke with his neck stiff. My mom is the most powerful person in the world. You better let my dad go, or you're done for. Xiaobao was really afraid that Lu Cheating would take action, so he quickly scolded her. Little bean, what are you talking about? Do you know who my mother is? Lei Lei let out a breath. I don't want to know who your mother is. Anyway, my father hates you. You are bad people. Lu Cheating looked at Lei Lei carefully for the first time, and something seemed to flash through her mind, but disappeared after a moment. Lei Lei, however, turned his back to them with a proud look on his face. Xiaobao pulled Lu Cheating away and spoke after a while. Mom, don't bother with a little kid. Will Dad really stay? Lu Cheating herself didn't know, and couldn't give a definite answer for a long time. She just said, I'll find a way. Xiaobao felt even more upset when he saw Lu Cheating leaving dejectedly. She finally knocked on the door of the room where Song Hongi was. Song Hongi was already sitting on a chair at this time. When he saw Xiaobao come in, he didn't say anything. Xiaobao walked up to Song Hongi with his head down, his hands hanging by his sides clenched tightly. She had no reaction at all in the first year after Song Hongi left. But starting from the second year after he left, the longing in her heart began to grow wildly. She once thought that if she just grew up quickly, she would be able to find her father. But her father was right in front of her at this moment, but he no longer loved her. Chapter 20. She didn't know how to ask for her father's forgiveness for the wrong things she had done. Dad, what should I do so that you can forgive me? I didn't understand at the time. I just. Song Hongi sighed and raised his hand to wipe away her tears. Xiaobao paused, tears burst out, and he hugged Song Hongi's hand tightly, crying heart-wrenchingly, as if he wanted to cry out all the grievances he had suffered over the years. Dad, I really missed you. Song Hongi patted her back gently and looked at the branches growing wildly outside the window. Xiaobao, you said you didn't understand back then. You were still young, but you knew clearly that Zhao Chuanza was the third party who destroyed other people's families, and you still loved him and protected him, even at the cost of hurting me again and again. You're saying you really don't understand, or you love Zhao Chuanza more? If you didn't know everything he's done, would you still be like this? Xiaobao, you are actually a selfish child. You believe whatever others say. Now you regret it and know how good I am. You come back to find me, but you have to know that no one will wait for you forever. Xiaobao even forgot to cry. He raised his head and looked at him blankly. He opened his mouth but didn't know how to answer. Song Hongi patted her back gently. Xiaobao, you know, I couldn't hold on for 6 years, but for you, I held on for a long time. You are my child, I love you very much, but you don't love your father. So Dad, I don't want you either. Xiaobao, you have to remember that this is your own choice, you have to stick to it and finish it. When Xiaobao looked into his gentle yet unfamiliar eyes, he did not shout or scream, but just shed tears silently. She knew that she had completely lost the father who once only loved her. She had lost it herself and could never find it again. Xiaobao left in a daze, and Song Hongi just watched her leaving quietly, without any emotion. A lot has changed in these 6 years. He thought, if Xiaobao had not spoken harshly to him that day, perhaps he would still miss this child. Unfortunately, there are no ifs in the world. The banquet was held as scheduled the next day. Lu Qiting took a white suit and brought it to Song Hongi's room. Hongi, wear this tonight and I'll let everyone know that you're still my husband. Song Hongi looked at the haute couture suit and frowned. Don't be crazy anymore, I'm already married, give Lei back to me. Lu Qiting's eyes darkened and she said, Lulu and Xiaobao are having a great time. If you want to see her, put this on and come with me. Song Hongi picked up the suit with a look of disgust on his face. I never thought you'd become so disgusting since you stopped worshipping Buddha. At this moment, Lu Qiting was holding the Buddhist beads in her hand and smiled with an ambiguous meaning. Since you appeared, my Buddhist heart has returned. Song Hongi was so disgusted by her that he spoke coldly to her. Go out, I need to change my clothes. Lu Qiting didn't say much at this time, but left. Song Hongi looked at the suit in his hand. It was his size and should fit him well, but he still loosened his grip and threw it into the trash can. It's impossible to make him obey. He is no longer the Song Hongi he was 6 years ago. Song Hongi went to the bathroom and washed his face. He looked exceptionally handsome in the mirror with a smile on his face. He pushed open the door and heard melodious music from downstairs. Look. Isn't that Mr. Song? Why is he dressed like this? 6 years have passed, and Miss Lu's husband is finally back. Chapter 21. Facing everyone's doubtful gazes, Song Hongi walked down the stairs slowly without changing his expression. Lei was held tightly by Xiaobao, and shouted excitedly when he saw Song Hongi. Dad. Dad, I'm here. Song Hongi tightened his grip, but remained expressionless, and gave Lei a soothing look. People around were surprised to see Lei. But then his eyes turned to Xiaobao again, and the look in his eyes spoke for itself. Xiaobao and Lei both call Song Hongi dad, but they don't look alike at all. Lu Qiting was not surprised by Song Hongi's performance. She looked gentle and smiled. Hongi, you look very handsome today. Song Hongi dodged her hand with an indifferent expression. He glanced at the crowd and his voice was dull. I'm here today just to let you know. I divorced Lu Qiting 6 years ago. I am not her husband. I am just myself, Song Hongi of the Song family. As soon as he finished speaking, everyone looked at him in shock. Lu Qiting paused with her fingertips pinching the Buddhist beads, her expression changed, and a hint of anger appeared on her face. Hongi, what do you mean by this? Song Hongi crossed his arms and curled his lips coldly. Lu Cheating, we have nothing to do with each other anymore. You'd better let Lei Lei and I go. Lu Cheating tightly grasped his wrist, with a hint of anger in her eyes. There was no fear in Song Hongi's eyes. Lu Cheating, you are making me feel really sick right now. Lu Cheating's chest heaved violently and her voice was dull. Today's banquet is over, everyone please leave on your own. Everyone looked at me and I looked at you. No one moved for a long while, as if they didn't understand the situation. The Lu family is so lively. Suddenly, a gentle female voice came into everyone's ears. Song Hongi's heart skipped a beat and he felt something familiar. The housekeeper looked at the post and shouted loudly. The eldest lady of the Li family in the imperial capital has arrived. The crowd became restless. The Li family. It's actually the Li family. But didn't the Li family move abroad a long time ago? Even if they left, they are still the first family. Why are they here? And the eldest daughter of the Li family. Li Ning was wearing a burgundy evening gown, looking very noble. Lei Lei saw Li Ning crying even more sadly. If Xiaobao hadn't held her tightly, she would have run over. Mom. Mom. Save Dad. Li Ning heard Lei Lei's voice and walked over slowly. Xiaobao was suppressed by Li Ning's aura and broke out in a sweat, and subconsciously let go of his hand. Lei Lei ran over and was picked up by Li Ning. Li Ning wiped Lei Lei's tears with a handkerchief and pinched her cheeks. Didn't you say you wanted to protect Daddy? Why did you start crying? Lei Lei gritted her teeth, trying hard not to cry out loud. I want to protect my dad. I won't cry. Song Hongi didn't expect Li Ning to come directly to the Lu family's banquet. He tried to break free from Lu Cheating's hand, but found that she didn't move at all. Seeing him like this, Lu Cheating had nothing to understand. Lu Li's mother is Li Ning. Song Hongi frowned but did not answer. Let go. It has nothing to do with you anyway. Lu Cheating's face was gloomy, as if she was enduring something. Why her? Why her? Song Hongi had already reached his limit of patience. So what? Lu Cheating, what else are you going to do? Li Ning held Lu Cheating's hand which was holding Song Hongi's hand. Although he was smiling, there was no trace of smile in his eyes. Ms. Lu, what do you want to do to my husband? Chapter 22. As soon as the words fell, everyone was in an uproar. What? Mr. Song is actually Miss Li's husband, what's going on? It's really worth coming to the banquet today. I guess it will be a big news tomorrow. But if I remember correctly, isn't there always a man following Miss Lu? Why can't I see him? You don't even know this. He's in jail. Xiaobao clenched her hands tightly, and those sympathetic and pitiful eyes fell on her, almost piercing through her. Even when Li Ning was holding the door, Lu Cheating did not let go, but looked at her with hostility. Hongi can only be mine. There was a stronger hint of amusement in Li Ning's eyes, but Song Hongi knew that the man was angry. He didn't want anything beyond his control to happen here, so he struggled hard to break free from Lu Cheating's shackles. Lu Cheating, I have been married to Li Ning for a long time. The person I love is her and only her. The man who drugged us back then was your cousin. He wants to marry you. If you don't believe me, you can go ask him in person. I never thought of asking you to give birth to the child, but Grandpa begged me, and I had no choice. My beginning with you was a mistake from the very beginning. Xiaobao suddenly looked up and looked at Song Hongi, tears falling silently. It turns out that she shouldn't have been born from the beginning. All the mistakes started with her, and she was the one who caused all the trouble. Lu Cheating obviously couldn't accept this truth. Her eyes were bloodshot and full of pain. I don't care what the truth is. You said you love her. Why? Isn't it me you love? Song Hongi slapped her in the face and said harshly. Wake up. Song Hongi slapped so hard that his palm was even numb. Li Ning frowned, a look of heartache flashed across her eyes, she held his hand and spoke in a coquettish tone. Hubby, let's go home. Song Hongi felt a headache seeing her like this, and he had to go back and comfort this girl. Lu Cheating did not stop them. She just watched their receding backs and closed her eyes in pain. This banquet was a feast to the ears of all the noble families in the imperial capital. Everyone left with great satisfaction, waiting to go back and talk about it in detail. Song Hongyi and Li Ning returned to the Li family. Lei Lei was reluctant to leave Song Hongyi, but was forcibly taken away by the servants. When Song Hongyi saw Li Ning's appearance, he knew that his life was in danger. He just turned around and was about to talk to her. Li Ning, Lei Lei was frightened yesterday and needs my company. You just arrived in the imperial capital, so go and rest first. Li Ning curled the corners of his lips and hooked his little finger around Song Hongyi's hand. An extremely charming voice reached Song Hongyi's ears. Don't you miss me these days? Song Hongyi's ears turned red, and he couldn't answer a word for a long time. Li Ning, calm down. Li Ning raised her hands and hugged his neck, her fingertips brushed across his cheek, and she smiled barely perceptible. I can't calm down, Hongyi, you don't know how much I miss you. Song Hongyi subconsciously hugged her waist, his ears turned red, but he started smiling again. Actually, I miss you too. Li Ning laughed sincerely, and the two went to the room. Hold your fingers together and be honest with each other. Hongyi, thank you for your hard work these days. Her red lips kissed his Adam's apple. Song Hongyi's body was extremely sensitive. When she touched a sensitive spot, he shuddered all over and his ears turned even redder. But fortunately, the matter has been resolved. Once I cure Yanhe, our family will leave the imperial capital. Chapter 23. There was satisfaction in Li Ning's eyes. He raised his head and kissed Song Hongyi on the cheek. I always listen to my husband. Song Hongyi straightened his waist, and after a moment he couldn't help but make an ambiguous sound. That's all you can say to cheer me up. Li Ning hugged his waist and back tightly, her fingertips running through Song Hongyi's short black hair, as if reminiscing about the past. I still remember the first time I saw you, you were just as handsome as you are now. Song Hongyi lowered his eyes to look at her, chuckled, and remembered something interesting. You were even more talkative then than you are now, a real playboy, but I never thought you were actually a pure-hearted woman. Li Ning seemed to have no idea of satisfaction and kept asking for more. From the first time I saw you, I knew that my life was in your hands. The dim setting sun shone into the room. The two people on the bed were entangled in each other's bodies, and the love in their eyes gradually overflowed. This night was the first time Song Hongyi slept peacefully since returning to the imperial capital. When the first ray of sunlight came in the early morning, Song Hongyi woke up. Li Ning supported his chin, not hiding the love in his eyes at all. Hongyi, you're awake. There were marks left by her nails on Song Hongyi's back, so he simply didn't get up and just continued to lie there. Li Ning massaged his waist and spoke to him attentively. I found out who kidnapped our daughter, but I didn't expect it to be him. Who? Song Hongyi frowned, then suddenly perked up. When the alarm from the villa sounded that day, he immediately rushed home from the hospital, and saw a few sneaky people trying to lure Lei Lei out. If he hadn't arrived in time, Lei Lei would have opened the door. He immediately called a group of security guards and arrested them. He was afraid and worried and asked Lei Lei why she opened the door. Lei Lei then realized that he had done something wrong and answered while crying. They kept saying that something happened to my dad. They knew my dad very well. I was scared. I thought something happened to my dad. Song Hongyi knew that it was done by someone who knew him very well. But the only one who meets this condition is Lu cheating. Li Ning tidied up the loose hair on Song Hongyi's forehead and continued. Zhao Chuanzi. Song Hongyi was shocked and looked over in disbelief. Is he crazy? Why kidnap Lei Lei? Shouldn't he be glad that I'm married and have a child? The emotion in Li Ning's eyes was unclear. That's true, but Zhao Chuanzi was sent to prison by Lu cheating himself. He was sentenced to life imprisonment for intentional injury. Song Hongyi was completely cleaned up, but he was actually sent to prison by Lu cheating. She was really cruel. Li Ning looked at Song Hongyi, kissed the corner of his mouth, and hugged him. If I knew the Lu family treated you like this, I would have come with you. You are such a scumbag, such an ungrateful bastard. I can't imagine how much you have suffered. Song Hongyi felt her gentle voice and the corners of his lips raised. But fortunately, I met you and Lei Lei in the end, and our family is happy together. Li Ning felt unprecedented satisfaction. Okay, we are together as a family and will never be separated. At this time, Lei knocked on the door hard and shouted loudly. "Mom, it's morning, time to give Dad back to me." Li Ning's face fell, as if she was a little annoyed. If only this girl was a boy, she wouldn't have snatched my husband away from me. Song Hongyi smiled and said this. "This is your little cotton-padded jacket, and it's also your little cotton-padded jacket that leaks air. Okay, get up, our daughter is urging us." Li Ning gently pulled Song Hongyi up and said with a smile. "Let's go, I'll have a good talk with this crying brat." Chapter 24. On the other side, Lu Qiting went to the Lu family's old house early the next morning. Xiaobao was worried about his mother, so he followed her. These past few days, Xiaobao seemed to have grown into a teenager overnight. He became mature and steady, but no longer talkative. Lu Qiting drove the car very fast and soon arrived at the Lu family's old house. The housekeeper of the old house was a little surprised to see Lu Qiting. "Ms. Lu, why are you here?" Lu Qiting suppressed her anger and spoke in a low voice. "Is Lu Jie at home?" The housekeeper also heard about what happened yesterday and was worried about Lu Jie. "Young master." Lu Qiting knew that she was trying to stop her, so she rushed in directly. She went to her cousin Lu Jie in a rage. Lu Jie was listening to DJ in the room and choosing clothes for himself. Thinking that the troublesome Zhao Chuanza had disappeared, it was his turn to seduce Lu Qiting. Bang! "Lu Jie, get out here." Lu Jie shuddered all over, and he saw Lu Qiting's gloomy face through the mirror. My heart skipped a beat for no apparent reason. He is not a child of the Lu family, but was adopted, but if he doesn't find a powerful woman, he was going to obey his family and marry a woman he didn't love. He had waited for Lu Qiting for so long, how could he be willing to find a woman who didn't love him? And a woman he didn't love. He quickly stood up from his chair, walked happily to Lu Qiting, and spoke with a smile. "Cousin, why are you here?" Lu Qiting looked at him coldly, threw a stack of evidence at his feet, and spoke indifferently. "From now on you are no longer a descendant of Lu." Lu Jie's face changed drastically, but he still spoke with all his strength. "Cousin, what do you mean?" Lu Qiting felt disgusted if she looked at him for even a second. "You were the one who drugged me back then, right? But you sent me to the wrong room, which is why I misunderstood Song Hongyi after I woke up." After hearing the whole truth, Xiaobao's heart couldn't help but ache. Her father had to endure so many years of grievances alone just because of a lie. Xiaobao hates his mother's ruthlessness, but he hates his own stupidity even more. Lu Jie shuddered all over, as if he had not expected that something that happened so many years ago would be exposed again. It was Lu Qiting who came to the door in person. He looked at those things tremblingly. From the records of his buying medicine to how he administered the medicine, everything was written clearly. Lu Jie could no longer maintain his original calmness, his face was filled with fear, and he cried. "Cousin, I was wrong. I was just possessed by the devil at the time. I didn't really want to do anything to you." Lu Qiting hates being plotted against by her relatives the most, but this cousin is the one she has spoiled since she was a child. Xiaobao did not try to persuade him, but just watched the scene in front of him quietly. Lu Qiting had made up her mind, and everyone already knew that Lu Jie had been expelled. Lu Jie was panicked and his face turned pale. He cannot lose the Lu family's surname, nor can he lose the Lu family's protection. Those who have grudges against him will surely come one after another, and he will die. Lu Jie knelt down and crawled to Lu Qiting's feet crying. "Cousin, I was wrong. I really know I was wrong. I can't leave the Lu family. Please. We grew up together, you can't do this to me. Grandpa will be sad." Lu Qiting closed her eyes and left with reluctance. Whether Grandpa will be sad or not, you will know when you die. Chapter 25. Lu Jie sat on the ground dejectedly, his delicate little face looking ashen. He was screwed, and he knew it. Xiaobao followed Lu Qiting from a distance. She could feel that her mother was very sad. But she didn't know how to comfort her because she was also very sad. It seemed that ever since she fell in love with Zhao Chuanza and blamed and hated Zhao Chuanza for staying away from her father, this family was gone. Now that her father has a new family and doesn't want her anymore, she has no right to disturb him. After thinking for a while, she ran forward and shouted loudly. "Mother." Lu Qiting stopped and had complicated thoughts. She turned around and looked at her daughter, who had grown very tall and reached her neck. She sighed and patted her shoulder. Xiaobao, it's Mom's fault. I'm sorry. Xiaobao had been suppressing the grievances in his heart, which finally exploded at this moment, and he leaned on Lu Qiting's shoulder and cried bitterly. Mom, I miss Dad. I regret it so much, but there is no way to change it. Let's just live a good life together, okay? Only at this moment did Lu Qiting realize that Xiaobao was just an 11-year-old child. After a long silence, Lu Qiting slowly uttered a word, okay. From then on, she would no longer bother Song Hongi, and the fate between him and her was completely severed. Song Hongi got out of the car. Suddenly, a strong wind blew up. He pinched his chest. At this moment, it seemed as if the stone that had been weighing on his heart had finally fallen to the ground. Dad, Mom, and I will be waiting for you at home. Song Hongi glanced at the scorching sun in the distance, quickly looked away, bent down and kissed Lei Lei on the cheek. Okay, wait for Dad to come back in the evening. Li Ning stretched out his slender fingers and pointed at his cheek, as if asking for a kiss. Hongi, what about me? Lei Lei looked at his mother, then at his father, and smiled secretly with his hands covering his mouth. Song Hongi's cheeks turned slightly red. He covered Lei Lei's eyes and quickly kissed Li Ning on the lips. Li Ning was startled for a moment, but then he laughed and said, wait for you to come back. When Song Hongi appeared in the hospital this time, no one dared to disrespect him. Everyone knows that the largest shareholder of this hospital is the Song family, and this Song family is Song Hongi's Song. Those who have spoken ill of Song Hongi in the past should be kept as far away from each other as possible. Song Hongi seemed to have no idea about this. He just held the report in his hand and gave instructions to the doctor beside him. Yanhee's body has always been strong, so there is no need to focus on nutritional supplements. Instead, we should focus on his body. Also, have you found a suitable heart? The vice president nodded. I found it and it will be delivered tomorrow. Song Hongi breathed a sigh of relief. This matter couldn't be delayed any longer. It would be fine as long as the heart was found. As long as the heart is there, he is confident that he can save Yanhee. When Song Hongi finished his work, he went to see Yanhee. Yanhee was full of tubes and lying quietly in the intensive care unit. Looking at the quiet Yanhee, he suddenly missed the lively and active Yanhee, the Yanhee who was always like a little son. No one expected that Yanhee would collapse due to a heart attack. You're here to see Yanhee too. Song Hongi looked at the person who was speaking. She was a woman with a great figure, but with dark circles under her eyes. It was obvious that she had not slept well for several days. Sister Mo. Song Hongi greeted Yan Mo, the head of the Yan family. Yan Mo nodded slightly and pinched his brows tiredly. How likely is this operation to succeed? Song Hongi looked at Yanhee, his voice extremely firm. 70%. Chapter 26. Yan Mo let out a barely noticeable sigh of relief, and seemed to feel a lot more relaxed. Xiaohe, it's great to have a friend like you. Thank you. Song Hongi waved his hands. It was all thanks to Yanhee, who always accompanied him in the past, otherwise he would not have been able to get over the knot in his heart. I should be the one to thank Xiaohe. Without him, I wouldn't be who I am today. There was silence in the air again. Song Hongi was really not used to being alone with Yan Mo. She was the most boring person he had ever met, and it seemed that she cared about no one except Yanhee. Yan Mo was the first to break the silence. Would you like to have a cup of coffee together? Song Hongi had the same idea, so he nodded and said. Okay, I have something to tell you. Yan Mo nodded, and they went to the cafe outside the hospital together. Song Hongi could sense that Yan Mo also had something to say to him, so he took a sip of coffee and waited quietly for Yan Mo to speak. Yan Mo was silent for a while before speaking with a slightly conflicted tone. This heart belongs to Ji Luochen. Song Hongi was stunned and almost dropped the coffee in his hand. He looked at her in disbelief. How could it be Ji Luochen's? Isn't she alive and well? What's more, she is. Having said this, Song Hongi couldn't say any more. Why did the heart belong to Ji Luochen? That was the person Yanhee loved deeply. Yan Mo slowed down and said in a deep voice. As early as the moment Xiaohe was diagnosed with heart disease, Ji Luochen also fell ill. She hoped to transplant her heart to Xiaohe, hoping that Xiaohe would use her heart to live for her. Just at midnight yesterday, Ji Luochen died on the operating table, and his heart is on the way. Song Hongyi's heart grew heavy uncontrollably. He seemed to have never expected that the woman who was so elegant and graceful would die just like that. What if Xiaohe can't find Ji Luochen when he wakes up? Yan Mo sighed and took out a letter. She wrote her last words to make Xiaohe think that she was a heartless person. At least he hated her and would not be so sad. Xiaohe is a free and easy person. He will let things go. Please visit him more often in the future. Song Hongyi's eyes were a little red, and his breath became dull. Ji Luochen's love is too deep. She would rather Yanhe live with hatred than let him know the truth. Because they all understood that Yanhe could not bear the truth and he would die. Song Hongyi felt heavy-hearted, but secretly he hoped Yanhe could live well. It's just a pity for Ji Luochen, such a bright and beautiful girl. Yan Mo broke the atmosphere at the moment. Miss Song, do you have anything to tell me? Song Hongyi took out a report and spoke to her. Xiaohe's condition should have been noticed a long time ago, but I don't know who was deliberately hiding it. Yan Mo's fingertips trembled, and his dark eyes turned cold in an instant. Someone wants to harm Xiaohe. Song Hongyi shook his head. You can only check this matter yourself. Yan Mo took the report and thanked him. Thank you. Let me know if you need anything from the Yan family in the future. Song Hongyi nodded slightly. After finishing his work in the hospital today, Song Hongyi was just about to go home when Li Ning showed up with Lei Lei. Lei Lei ran out of the car and threw herself into Song Hongyi's arms. Dad. I missed you so much. Song Hongyi smiled and touched Lei Lei's head, and all the fatigue of the day seemed to be swept away. Li Ning opened his arms, took a step forward and hugged him. Hongyi, let's go home. Chapter 27. Song Hongyi smiled at Li Ning and said gently. Let's go home. We are really tired today. Li Ning helped him take off his backpack and opened the car door himself. I'll give you a massage when we get back. Before getting into the car, Song Hongyi glanced at the alley not far away, and then looked away after a moment. Xiaobao leaned against the wall, but couldn't help but secretly look in the direction they left. Dad, I miss you so much. Song Hongyi was sitting in the car and actually saw Xiaobao, but he still left. Sometimes he would wonder if this was fair to a child, but he couldn't get an answer in his heart. Some damage, once done, can never be undone. Even if you forgive, the hurt will become a thorn and will always be there. Lei Lei climbed onto Song Hongyi's legs, held his face and smiled. Dad, are you unhappy? Song Hongyi was indeed unhappy, but he didn't expect that a child could notice it. He rubbed Lei Lei's cheek. Lulu, Daddy is just too tired, not unhappy. Lei Lei wrinkled his face, as if he was thinking about what to do. He thought for a long time before speaking. Then Dad, let me tell you a joke, and you won't be tired anymore. Song Hongyi's attention was immediately attracted. Lei Lei was only 4 years old. What kind of jokes could he tell? Lei Lei, tell me what you think. Li Ning also smiled. Lei Lei, Mommy listens too. Lei Lei immediately straightened his chest, as if he was very proud. Once upon a time, there was a mountain. On the mountain there was a temple. In the temple there was a nun named Li Ning. One day. Before she could finish her words, Li Ning pinched her cheek. Even the driver couldn't help laughing. Miss Li's child is so cute. Li Ning pinched Lei Lei's cheek and spoke almost viciously. What's that nun's name again? Lei Lei hugged Song Hongyi's hand and made faces at Li Ning. Mom is that fat nun. Song Hongyi couldn't help laughing at the mother and daughter, and wanted to look at Li Ning who looked unhappy. Li Ning, you are a nun, and a fat nun. Li Ning's face turned even darker and he touched his face. Don't you think it's a pity that such a handsome man becomes a nun? Lei Lei hugged his arms, and he and Li Ning looked like they were cut from the same mold. Mom is vain. Song Hongyi agrees with this point very much. It was a cool night and Song Hongyi dreamed of the past. The first time he met Li Ning was in a foreign hospital. He came to the hospital with his tutor for a consultation and met the injured Li Ning. His face was covered in blood, and my first reaction was to ask if he would be disfigured. Song Hongyi responded at the time, maybe. Anyway, there is still the option of plastic surgery. Li Ning was completely dejected at that time and let Song Hongyi wipe the blood for her. But when she looked up and looked carefully at Song Hongyi's face, she paused and said something subconsciously. "Can I chase you?" Song Hongyi paused with his hand holding the alcohol cotton pad and looked at her in shock. Li Ning, stimulated by the alcohol, subconsciously held his hand. "Dr. Song, be gentle, it hurts." Song Hongyi only felt that the place where she held was extremely hot. He quickly bandaged her and left the hospital. Li Ning could clearly see the name on the work badge on his chest. Song Hongyi. From that day on, Li Ning was like a dog skin plaster, coming to the hospital every day to pester Song Hongyi. She still had wounds on her body from time to time, and she only let Song Hongyi treat her. However, Song Hongyi thought she was a young lady with nothing to do, so he was not friendly to her. Chapter 28. Li Ning had some wounds on his hands that day, and they kept bleeding. Song Hongyi looked at her indifferently and treated her wound as usual. "Don't let the wound get wet for the next few days." "Dr. Song, why can't you smile?" Song Hongyi looked puzzled and frowned. "What's so funny about being in a hospital? Do you want me to say welcome to you?" Li Ning paused for a moment, then burst into laughter. "I thought Dr. Song was serious, but I didn't expect you could joke." Song Hongyi couldn't help but rolled his eyes at him in the end. "It's bandaged, you can go out now." Li Ning grabbed his wrist, her cheeks flushed. "There is a dance tomorrow. I wonder if I have the honor to invite you to attend." Song Hongyi was shocked when he saw the look in her eyes. He knew this woman was serious. He took a deep breath, pulled his hand back, and spoke to her in a low voice. "I'm divorced and have a child. Don't you even check my background before approaching me." He originally thought that after he said this, the woman in front of him would give up. Unexpectedly, Li Ning's eyes were full of heartache. He changed his previous nonchalant look and spoke seriously. "It's not your fault. Besides, you can only be freed from suffering and have a bright future. So let me heal you." Li Ning's eyes were serious, without any other emotions. Song Hongyi's heart trembled, but he still refused to look at her. "I have already crawled out of one grave, do you think I will crawl into another grave?" Li Ning was choked for a moment and couldn't say a word for a long time. It took him a long time to continue speaking. "But this is not a grave, this is happiness." Song Hongyi's heart, which had been submerged for a long time, began to beat again. For some reason, he agreed in a daze. Looking at Li Ning's back as he happily left, he couldn't help but laugh. Just think of it as a way to relax. But when she arrived at the agreed dance, she found out Li Ning's identity. Li Jia, the eldest daughter of the Li family in the imperial capital, is also the youngest patriarch of the Li family. Song Hongyi watched her walk towards him step by step, bend slightly, and extend her hand to him. "Mr. Song, are you willing to dance with me for the first dance tonight?" Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, Song Hongyi took her hand and slid into the dance floor and danced the first dance with her. Li Ning was eye-catching under the light, not the fool who hurt herself on purpose just to see him. Song Hongyi could actually see that her wound didn't look like she was beaten, but rather like she had hurt herself intentionally. It wasn't too big or too small, just enough to be bandaged in the hospital. She was really not afraid of the pain. Song Hongyi and she work well together and they are such a perfect match. When the dance was over, everyone applauded sincerely, as if they were the brightest stars tonight. Song Hongyi said goodbye politely to everyone and left the dance party. Li Ning chased after him. She looked at Song Hongyi, who was standing on the beach with his belly full and feeling the cold wind. For the first time, I felt that he looked so cold and lonely, like a rose blooming alone at midnight. Li Ning took the coat, walked slowly forward and put it on Song Hongyi's shoulders, as if trying to shield him from the cold wind. Song Hongyi felt the warmth on his shoulder, turned around, and met Li Ning's eyes. Li Ning stood beside him and said to him with a smile, "Dr. Song, today is the Mid-Autumn Festival in China. I will take you to fly Confronting lanterns during the Mid-Autumn Festival." Song Hongyi covered his mouth and smiled. Where did the Confronting lanterns come from? Li Ning took his hand and led him forward. "If I say yes, then there will be." Chapter 29. He was led by Li Ning and ran forward. She quietly placed a Confronting lantern in the car. Li Ning took out a lighter and lit the Confronting lantern. They held a corner of the Confronting lantern together. Li Ning said to him, "Dr. Song, you must speak your wish out loud in your heart, and the gods in heaven will hear it." They released the Confronting lanterns together. Song Hongi watched the Confronting lanterns flying farther and farther away, as if he had returned to his hometown. He couldn't help but smile, tears welling up in his eyes. "Li Ning, are you a fool? This is a foreign country, where can gods come from? There is only Satan." Li Ning was not discouraged, but said sincerely, "But with me, your wish to me is more effective than that to gods, and I will make it come true." Song Hongi looked into her eyes and his heartbeat gradually accelerated. Li Ning helped him gather his clothes. Then he took out a sparkler from somewhere and lit it. The fairy wand is like a blooming firework, burning little by little. The breeze by the river blew them, and their heartbeats quietly came at this moment. After this day, Li Ning no longer had any wounds on his body. Instead, he appeared in front of Song Hongi many times with a licking face to make his presence felt. He even became familiar with Song Hongi's senior brothers and sisters, and was almost as good at getting along with them as Song Hongi. During this year, under Li Ning's offensive, Song Hongi gradually accepted her and agreed to his first date with her. When Song Hongi arrived at the agreed square, he saw Li Ning playing with the band. She stood in the middle with a guitar in her hand, her slender fingers plucking the strings, and the tune she played was so beautiful. Song Hongi just stood in front of her, looking up at her with the people in the crowd. Li Ning held the microphone and spoke gently but firmly. "Hongi, I like you." A strong wind blew in the square and white doves took off one after another. It was so beautiful. Song Hongi took a step towards her unconsciously. Li Ning insisted on finishing playing a song, took down the guitar, stepped down from the stage, and ran towards Song Hongi unwaveringly. "Hongi, does it sound good?" The woman's fair face was filled with smiles, yet she was also shy in front of her beloved. Song Hongi felt the hot gazes of the people around him, so he grabbed her hand and fled from the crowd. Li Ning looked at Song Hongi's hand, his heart became particularly excited, and he shook hands with him with a smile. Song Hongi took her to the beach, where many people were feeding sea pigeons. He looked at the blue ocean, his heart gradually calmed down, and he said to Li Ning with a smile, "Li Ning, you play very well, I like it very much." The sun was shining brightly, shining on them with warmth and gentleness. Li Ning was stunned, with deep love flowing in her eyes. "Hongi, I should say, I love you." Song Hongi's heart skipped a beat and he looked at Li Ning's face for a long time without reacting. After this day, subtle changes occurred in their relationship. Song Hongi no longer resisted Li Ning's contact. Even his fellow brothers and sisters around him laughed and teased him. "Your little suitor is here again." Song Hongi looked over and saw Li Ning standing outside the hospital, raising her hand and greeting him with a smile. Song Hongi couldn't help laughing when he saw her like this. He put down his work and walked out. "Why are you here again?" Li Ning smiled, but looked a little sad. "Hongi, you are so busy every day. I can only invite you out once every 2 weeks." Song Hongi looked at her aggrieved expression, just like a puppy. "Then I'm sorry, I'll treat you to dinner." Chapter 30. Li Ning immediately smiled happily and left with Song Hongi. Song Hongi always felt that she was deliberately playing the victim, but looking at Li Ning's excited face, he smiled helplessly. They got off the car, and Li Ning pulled him through the ancient streets and alleys. The buildings here are European-style buildings from 100 years ago, and they have been preserved to this day. Song Hongi was fascinated for a moment as he looked at the alleys that seemed to have a sense of history. Li Ning took out a necklace and put it around Song Hongi's neck. She said, "I prayed to God for this necklace. It will keep you safe." Song Hongi raised his hand and looked at the necklace, his heart trembling. "I love it, thank you." Just at this time, Song Hongi received a call from the hospital. "There is an emergency patient and he must come." Song Hongi had no choice but to smile apologetically at Li Ning. "There's a patient here and I have to be there." Li Ning did not look displeased, but personally sent him back to the hospital. "Go ahead." Song Hongi put on a white coat and waved goodbye to her. The senior sister who was traveling with him told him secretly, It's a gang leader that's here this time, we all have to be careful. Song Hongyi's heart tensed for a moment, but then he relaxed after a moment. Just treat him as an ordinary patient, otherwise it would be bad to be too nervous. When Song Hongyi put on gloves and was disinfecting them, the gangster boss couldn't help but cry out in pain. His little brother rushed in with a knife in an instant. The doctors in the ward were all startled and stopped what they were doing. The scene suddenly became tense and everyone looked at each other. One of the gangsters said viciously, "If you don't cure my boss, you will die." Song Hongyi's eyebrows jumped when he looked at the silver glowing knives. Just at this moment, Li Ning walked in. She leaned against the door frame and looked at these people coldly. "Sang Biao, do you know me?" The gangster boss lying on the hospital bed heard the voice and forced himself to open his eyes and look over. The color on his face instantly drained away with fright, and he was covered in cold sweat. Li Ning saw his reaction and knew that he recognized her, so she held up a finger. "One number, get out," the gangster boss said quickly with a hoarse voice. "Everyone get out. And put away your knives." These men didn't know Li Ning, but since their boss had said so, they immediately followed his instructions and left in a swarm. Li Ning waited until it was quiet inside, smiled at Song Hongyi, and left. Song Hongyi was dazzled by her smile, and he calmed down and focused on the operation. By the time he had finished everything, it was already getting dark. As soon as he returned to the office, he saw Li Ning had fallen asleep with his forehead propped up. He carefully covered her with a blanket. Li Ning suddenly held his hand and opened his eyes. Song Hongyi met her eyes for a long time. "Li Ning, I think I'm a little in love with you." Li Ning chuckled and interlocked her fingers with his. "Hongyi, I love you." Song Hongyi was awakened by the dazzling sunlight. He met Li Ning's smiling eyes. Song Hongyi raised his hand and couldn't help pinching her face. "So many years have passed, and I don't know how this girl has maintained herself. There has been no change at all." Li Ning's face was deformed by his pinch, and she couldn't help but raise her hand and hold his hand. "Hongyi, what's wrong with you? You kept calling my name last night, it was really nice." The charming feeling in Song Hongyi's heart disappeared instantly, and he raised his hand and gently touched her hair. "You're just talking nonsense. Get up. I have a major surgery to perform today." Chapter 31. Li Ning knew that it was Yan He's illness, so she didn't make a fuss and wanted to take good care of Lei Lei at home. But when Lei Lei heard that it was to treat Yan He's illness, she insisted on going with him. She pulled at Li Ning's trouser legs and begged, "Mom, that's my godfather. I want him to see me, his goddaughter, first when he wakes up." Li Ning was so annoyed by her that he had no choice but to nod and agree. Okay, Mom will take you there." Lei Lei immediately let go of his hand and laughed non-stop. Li Ning shook her head helplessly. Lei Lei really looked like her when she was a child. After Song Hongyi arrived at the hospital, he greeted Yan Mo and entered the operating room. Everything was ready. Song Hongyi looked at Yan He, who was breathing weakly, and took a deep breath. Surgery in progress. Li Ning brought Lei Lei to the hospital. Yan Mo stood at the door with a nervous look on his face and saw that Li Ning's slightly furrowed brows had not relaxed. After a long while, he spoke slowly. "You're here." Li Ning knew that she was worried, so he didn't say anything and just patted her shoulder. Lei Lei, who has always been naughty, now looks like a little adult, nervously looking at the door of the operating room. Time seemed to slow down, and the hour hand turned round and round. Finally 8 hours passed. Song Hongyi finally came out with a tired look on his face. Li Ning comforted Lei Lei, who had fallen asleep, and then stepped forward to support Song Hongyi. Yan Mo's eyes were bloodshot, but he couldn't help asking, "Dr. Song, what's going on?" Song Hongyi pinched his eyebrows and nodded. The operation was successful. Yan He will probably wake up within a week. He will have to stay in the hospital to observe the rejection reaction. Yan Mo's heart sank. He wanted to laugh, but couldn't. Li Ning squeezed his palm distressedly. "I'll take you to rest." Song Hongyi shook his head, changed his clothes, and then carried Lei Lei to the lounge for a short nap. Li Ning had been staying with them both, waiting for them to wake up. This night is destined to be restless. Song Hongyi didn't sleep for several hours and went to Yan He's ward because he was worried about him. Yan He's complexion is not as bad as before, said the doctor on duty. Master Yan has recovered very well. It's as if this heart has been waiting for him. Song Hongyi and Yan Mo, who was not far away, looked at each other, and their mood became heavy. He checked Yan He's body and didn't feel relieved until he found no problems at all. Yan Mo looked nervous and Song Hongyi sighed. Yan Mo became nervous instantly. Dr. Song, could it be that Xiaohe's body? Song Hongyi interrupted her and spoke helplessly. If you don't get some rest, when you collapse, Xiaohe will feel guilty to death when he wakes up. Besides, only you can talk about that matter. Yan Mo shook his head helplessly and looked at Yan He with heartache. After a while, he went downstairs to rest, but still said, "If Xiaohe wakes up, please tell me." Song Hongyi nodded and asked her to go downstairs and rest. This week, Song Hongyi and Yan Mo hardly ever left Yan He's ward. But a week passed and Yan He still hadn't woken up, and Yan Mo was extremely anxious. Song Hongyi was also a little nervous. Ahem. A sudden cough startled everyone in the room. Yan He's fingertips trembled as he lay on the hospital bed. He slowly opened his eyes, but a crystal tear flowed from the corner of his eye. They all looked over. Song Hongyi called out in surprise. "Xiaohe." Yan Mo sat beside the bed, extremely excited, his eyes filled with so many emotions. "Xiaohe, you finally woke up." Chapter 32. Yan He's gaze moved among the people in the room, and finally landed on Yan Mo. The voice was hoarse, but full of longing. "Sister." Yan Mo gently held his hand and spoke softly. "My sister is here." Song Hongyi wiped the tears from the corners of his eyes. "You guys talk first." Song Hongyi and Li Ning took Xiaobao and quietly left the ward, leaving the space for the two of them. Li Ning could see that Song Hongyi was in a bad mood and squeezed his palm. "Hongyi, it's good as long as you wake up, isn't it? Everything will pass, time will heal them." Song Hongyi forced a smile. "Li Ning, I want to go see Grandpa." Li Ning knew that the grandfather he was talking about was the old man of the Lu family, and he was also familiar with those past events, so he nodded. "I'll go with you." Lei Lei also raised his hand. "Dad, and me." Song Hongyi smiled and nodded in agreement. They set off to the cemetery. This is the first time Song Hongyi has appeared here in 6 years. For a moment, my thoughts were complicated. He bowed deeply at Grandpa Lu's grave. "Grandpa, I'm sorry, my fate with the Lu family has ended." The breeze was blowing, and Song Hongyi seemed to feel the old man's touch. Song Hongyi thought back to the old man who had wholeheartedly protected him, and for a moment, he burst into tears. Lei Lei tugged at Li Ning's sleeve, worry all over her face. Li Ning shook his head and stood aside with Lei Lei waiting. After a long time, Song Hongyi wiped the tears from his face. "Grandpa, I'm going to pursue my own happiness too." Song Hongyi walked towards Li Ning and Lei Lei. Li Ning looked at Grandpa Lu's grave and nodded slightly. However, just as they turned around and were about to leave, they ran into Lu Qiting and Xiaobao. Lu Qiting's pupils trembled, and Xiaobao looked surprised. But when they saw Li Ning and Lei Lei beside Song Hongyi, their faces changed again. Song Hongyi ignored Lu Qiting, but when he passed by Xiaobao, he stopped. "Xiaobao, I take back what I said before. You are actually a very good child, and Daddy really loved you." Xiaobao trembled all over and tears welled up in his eyes. "Dad." Song Hongyi and the others had already left. Xiaobao's face was covered with tears, and there was relief in his eyes. "Dad, I wish you happiness." Song Hongyi snatched Lei Lei from Li Ning's arms and raised his head proudly. "I saw you rolling your eyes at them just now." Li Ning touched his nose. He didn't expect to be discovered. He felt unjustified and angry. "I just don't like that person." Lei Lei is exactly the same as Li Ning. Help Dad vent his anger. Song Hongyi felt a little warm in his heart and spoke with a smile. "Okay then, let's go home. We have to stay in the capital for another month, then we should fly back, otherwise Yan He will pester us again." Li Ning stared at Lei Lei with deep eyes and said with a smile. "Yan He seems to be in a bad mood. Doesn't he always like Lei Lei?" Let's lend Lei to him for a month or two. We can go traveling to relax. Lei agreed immediately. Okay. I like my father, I want to stay with him. Song Hongi thought of Yan He's beloved Ji Luochen and subconsciously agreed. The mother and daughter high-fived quietly, as if their plan had succeeded. Song Hongi reacted and was about to beat them up. Li Ning snatched Lei away and ran away. Lei smiled and said, "Mom, let's run." The shadows of the family of three, in the afterglow of the setting sun, cling to each other and walk step by step towards a happy future. End.